changed? Do get in touch. GBNews at gbnews.uk.
It's the Great British Breakfast with Simon and Ellie.
OK, let's start the day by taking a look at some of today's newspaper front pages. The Daily Mail is our first. It leads with Boris's New Year cheer. The Mail's sources said nothing in the figures suggested the hospitals were about to be overwhelmed. It also highlighted the huge boost hospitality would get from the Prime Minister's decision.
The eye's gone for no new COVID restrictions before 2022. It says Boris Johnson made the decision after receiving pre-Christmas data. It also says that the NHS is not facing an exponential rise in hospital admissions, although it is still under pressure. This is made worse by thousands of workers being off sick with coronavirus.
And the headline in the Times is no COVID curbs on New Year's parties. It also highlights the plight of consumers, saying household energy bills are set to double. The average price of energy bills could reach more than £1,800. That's according to estimates sent by Ofgem to ministers.
The Express has gone for dire warning. Energy bills could double. It says soaring gas and electricity prices will cause an enormous crisis next year.
Bit of doom and gloom on the front of the Mirror. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is a no-show despite record COVID crisis and NHS staff shortages. Uncertainty reigns, even New Year's Eve celebrations going ahead, it says.
And on the Telegraph as well, no new restrictions on New Year's Eve. Another story on the cover is energy. Bills could triple unless a £20 billion fund is set up to help, ministers have warned.
On the front of the Star, Happy New Beer, celebrating no lockdown and balmy temperatures of 15 degrees with hopefully a cold beer. And the first picture of the Windsor Castle crossbow suspect features in the paper.
Well, this morning we have a panel to go through the stories inside the papers. Benjamin Butterworth from the I paper and former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire join us this morning. Good morning to you both. Thank you so much for joining us. Benjamin, let's start with you. It's all over the papers this morning. New Year's Eve celebrations have been given the go-ahead. Is Boris Johnson right to do nothing at this stage?
I think it's very difficult, actually. You know, if you'd asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have said that clearly the other nations, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, were probably doing the right thing. But I think we've had that evidence just before Christmas from the UK Health Security Agency that said that hospitalisations are 50 to 70% lower for this Omicron variant than they were for the Delta variant. And I think that's what the government is gambling with here, because the numbers of people going into hospital over Christmas Eve, Christmas Day in London were below that number of 400. And basically what they said was that if it gets over 400 people in hospital in London each day, and London is leading the curve on this variant, then we'll probably need restrictions. Actually, it was only 278, only in inverted commas. And so I think that's what the government's doing. But the problem is that if it's 50 to 70% less likely to hospitalise you, well, figures are more than 100,000 cases a day. Well, that's more than double what it was for the last 5 months since we fully unlocked. And so I think at the moment it's justifiable for this week. But I fear that mid-January we could be in a pretty bad situation.
Scarlett, this is not about the science. This is about the raw politics of this. He would not have got it through.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely what I think. I mean, look, on the one hand, I really hated lockdown. I don't want another lockdown. I think we have to be really, really careful. It's crazy. But I certainly do not trust Boris Johnson's instincts. He's doing it because he knows he can't get a lockdown through Parliament, or he has to have it with Labour, which is terrible for him. And that actually, if he starts doing anything, any sort of restrictions, he's got the Tory MPs against him who probably would quite like another leader. So. No, this is not about the data. This is about the politics. And that's why it's so difficult, is you just can't trust that the right things are happening.
And Benjamin, this is going to raise hopes, isn't it, that we can get through this winter wave with no restrictions at all in England? Well,
yeah, I think everyone hopes that. I have to say, I think the willingness of Tory MPs to rebel is slightly overstated. I think they were against the COVID passports because of sort of, attitudes to libertarian attitudes. but they've always voted for the lockdown, and they do tend to fall in line. So I'm not sure whether they would be that against it. But I think, we're taking a gamble here. If you look at the other European countries, like Germany, for example, many of them have already locked down. The other 3 nations of the UK has locked down. So it's quite a bold experiment by Boris Johnson. Maybe it is an easier way through with his backbenchers and with his Tory MPs. But if you get to the middle of January and someone gets, hit by a bus or has a stroke and they can't get a bed in ICU, well, then he's going to have a much more serious problem on his hands, because people will be furious if we get to that point, especially after everything they've given up in the last 2 years.
Yeah, but when you say we're taking a gamble here, we saw before Christmas that people were cancelling bookings of their own free will. And those are words I use advisedly, because our own free will at some point needs to be reintroduced into this. And isn't this perhaps the moment that's happening?
Well, I absolutely understand that. But the problem, and I think own free will is great. And Sarah Vine was saying in the Mail that that's how we should do it. The problem is that for all the hospitality places, all the pubs that had cancelled Christmas parties, all the staff who are being let go because of it, they get no recompense. And so, yes, I think it's absolutely right. And actually, it's always been that the British people have been ahead of the government. No question about it.
But I would say that I think that might change, because I was sort of in a self-imposed lockdown running up to Christmas because I didn't want to ruin Christmas. It's a unique time of year. I suspect that if there aren't government rules, then a lot of people will be more relaxed in January, because 7 days isolation, which is all it has to be if they get a negative test at the end of it, well, that's not such a serious problem in January. I dare say some people would quite like 7 days isolation in the middle of January.
The one thing that struck me was if you live near the border in the south of Scotland, you're going to be nipping over into England, aren't you, for Hogmanay?
Well, or Wales. Absolutely. There's the problem of it, and I think you're right, sir. It is an incredible risk, and the other risk is not being able to leave England at some stage. Already we can't go to France. The Germans don't want us. When are the Scots and the Welsh going to say, no, you're lepers?
I think we're going to see a lot of Airbnb bookings potentially.
I've got used to it over the years, Scarlett. It's all right. You mentioned the possibility of a replacement for Boris Johnson, and the paper's suggesting that Liz Truss is overtaking Rishi Sunak in that race, Benjamin.
Yeah, Liz Truss is supposedly the new Margaret Thatcher. She's had a makeover, she's got these power clothes, she's clearly pushing herself forward. If you remember that picture she did just before Christmas, where she was sort of sat like the Queen.
Very regal, yeah.
Exactly. She's clearly trying to present herself in that stateswomanly way. I think that, there is no real prospect of a leadership election within the Tory party, in my view. There might be all these skirmishes within Parliament, but the only thing any of them care about is who's going to get them elected at the next general election. And chances are Boris Johnson is still able to do that. He's a proven election winner, whether I like it or not. And so I don't think there's going to be a vacancy anytime soon. But I do think Liz Truss is quite clever, because she knows that Tory members are on the right of Tory voters, and she is really positioning herself in that spot, which is interesting because, of course, she was a hardline Remainer when the Brexit referendum happened.
And Scarlett, your thoughts on Liz Truss as PM?
Yeah, I think Liz Truss has been overtaking Rishi Sunak for quite some time. Partly because poor old Rishi is left sort of trying to do two completely different things at the same time, which is deliver a Boris budget which busts everything, and then say, but really, I'm a Thatcherite economist, and this doesn't sit well. Liz Truss didn't just do the Queen thing; she did the Margaret Thatcher picture in the tank, with her looking like a sort of Boadicea, the warrior queen. Liz Truss has her own photographer who puts all these pictures on Instagram. She has been wooing the Tory faithful for quite some time, promising them, a sort of new Elizabethan Margaret Thatcher era. And I think that the problem after North Shropshire is they don't know that Boris can win. And you're absolutely right. That's all they're interested in is, can I keep my seat at the next election?
But you know what? She's practically Prime Minister already, because she's Foreign Secretary, she's International Development Secretary, and she's just taken over the Brexit Secretary role. I mean, she's got half the cabinet jobs as it is.
And equalities.
And equalities, although she's not particularly committed to that one, in my view. You know, I don't know where she gets time to do these photoshops with 4 ministerial roles.
Well, you just know that Rishi Sunak's team are looking on and perhaps not best pleased.
No, not at all, because, I mean, remember that he too has his photographer who keeps on reminding us how much he spends on his shoes.
And isn't it dubious that all Rishi Sunak's photos and videos that he puts out, they don't say the Conservative Party, they say Rishi Sunak. You know, these are people that are spending a lot of time planning their leadership bids. And I think, you know, when we're in a pandemic, when everything's such a mess like it has been for the last 2 years, you know, as a voter, I find that pretty dubious, to be honest.
Another big story on the front pages of the papers today is this energy bill's enormous crisis on the horizon. It could push prices £2,000 a year. Scarlett, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, it's just a disaster. I mean, you know, there's the as Theresa May called them, the jams, the just about managing, which have just that while some people saved an awful lot of money during the pandemic, other people lost quite a lot. And these people are very, they're going to have real problems. Remember that people on benefits, they've had their benefits cut by £20 a week. And then we've got the soaring costs. Food banks are already basically at breaking point. I think it's terrible. And I mean, the government is going to have to step in. Meanwhile, we have energy companies going bust, but because nobody's thought it through enough.
Yeah, I love that phrase, the government's going to have to step in. That's us, it's taxpayers, isn't it? We're going to have to help ourselves out with the tax bills. And when we talk about just about managing, Benjamin, everyone, I suspect, was looking at their thermostat over Christmas and taking it down a bit. And fortunately, the weather looks good for the next week or so. But people are going to be cold because they can't afford to heat their homes this winter.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, New Year's Eve is expected to be 15 degrees, which is the warmest ever recorded. So I think everyone, you know, looking at the thermostat will be relieved about that. But you've got a problem here, because actually one of the reasons why we're having this gas price companies collapsing is because the government tried to split them up. It tried to create lots of new smaller ones. And now, lo and behold, you've had the natural price rise sharply, and these companies can't make a profit and they've collapsed, and now the government is forced to step in. So in a way, it's a creation of a failed government policy in the first place, of Theresa May and, in fact, Ed Miliband, who had the idea in the first place. That idea hasn't gone to plan. And I think there's a big question about, you know, whether the government steps in with how it affects price caps, or whether it steps in to fund these companies so that they can keep going, so that people still have their energy supplies. But this is the real politics, as it were. You know, you can talk about Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak's attempts to be Tory leader, but actually, if people don't have enough money in their pocket, if they can't heat their homes, that's when a government loses.
Well, and actually, I mean, if you're talking about energy prices, I mean, one of the most appalling things is that you were supposed to work out which was the best way to do it, instead of actually having the lowest price for everybody. I mean, the lowest possible price. I mean, so that whether you're on the right thing or not. It was all very, very complicated, and it just seemed mad. And it's saying the market is more important, and for something as basic as energy, you actually need to control the market properly, not in the way it's been done.
Yeah, you need a degree to sort out your energy tariff and your rail fares, don't you? There are the two things that are a nightmare to sort out. A quick word, perhaps, about this intruder at Windsor Castle on Christmas Day, and an interview with his father. He's been held under the Mental Health Act, but his father has been giving an interview, and rather moving.
Very moving. I mean, I think his father actually has done an awful lot of good for saying, rather than saying this boy is evil, is saying we just have no idea what went wrong. You know, this he was perfectly normal, and suddenly he does this completely, I mean, out of control thing. And clearly, thank goodness that we're actually treating it properly and saying it is about mental health. And what's so strange is that the Daily Mail has a whole thing about Ken Wolfe, who will do anything, clearly, to get himself in the papers saying we need to look at protection. I mean, actually, what happened is he was caught within a minute of scaling. This shouldn't have happened, but actually, this is what security is about, is they stop things from happening, and they stopped it.
Well, we'll be coming back to that later on in the morning. You're with us all morning, the two of you. Thank you very much for your thoughts.
And you're still smiling
on
about
the
it.
front pages. That's Benjamin Butterworth from the I Paper and former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire. Thank you so much for your thoughts.
You're watching The Great British Breakfast. Now, coming up, nationwide prostate cancer screening could be available in the next 5 years. We're going to talk to oncologist Professor Carol Sikora. But first, here's a look at the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
So there you go. That'll be one.
See you later.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Hello, you're watching The Great British Breakfast with Simon McCoy and me, Ellie Costello. Now, travel experts are warning of severe disruption over the new year as airline passengers have been hit by the grounding of thousands of flights due to staff shortages caused by COVID. Around 8,000 flights were cancelled globally between Christmas Eve and Boxing Day. Well, our London reporter Alice Porter joins us now. Good morning to you, Alice. I believe you're still isolating. You yourself have been hit by COVID. I hope you're feeling better. How bad is the flight disruption currently?
Good morning, Ellie. Yes, the latest figures show that more than 3,000 flights were cancelled yesterday, 54 of them to and from Heathrow, the busiest airport, of course, in the UK. So it's really, really highly significant. Now, normally when flights are grounded at this time of year, it's because of bad weather, but it's very much because, sadly, coronavirus is having such a big impact on staff shortages, but particularly because of and that's causing issues with staff shortages, particularly in the US, particularly in China. There's a huge amount of disruption there, but that has a knock-on effect globally around the world with so many flights disrupted. Now, of course, Christmas is a peak time for people to be travelling. Same with New Year. Over this festive period, lots of people are wanting to see family in the way that they haven't been able to do for some time. And of course, it's been a very, very difficult 2 years for the sector. So simply, many in the travel industry want those flights to be taken off.
With all the uncertainty, Alice, if the fear is that things could actually get worse.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the real concern. So let's look at the UK first. So the travel sector was kind of recovering during the sort of the end of this sort of last bit of this year, and then Omicron hit. And unfortunately, that meant that the government understandably brought in more travel restrictions in order to try and kind of combat the spread of Omicron. But the unfortunate reality is that with more testing, that's quite off-putting to passengers, and so that ends up hurting airlines. So the demand isn't there as we would do normally, and there's a real concern that if these restrictions continue, then we could see a real downturn in the sector, which would really, really damage the economy. But so that's looking at sort of the picture within the UK. Let's just say you do want to go abroad at this time of year and you want to do your PCR and you do want to do your form filling. Well, where do you go? So France and Germany have both said that they're not going to take people coming from the UK. Austria are now making it quite difficult. You have to prove you're boosted. So, for example, if you wanted to go skiing at this time of year, that whole market has gone. And then with all the travel disruption that we're seeing at the moment, it's a lot less appealing for people to do a last-minute getaway. So that's sort of the extent of things if we sort of look at it. And the concern is that more countries could bring in more restrictions. So Paul Charles is a travel expert, and he's concerned that more countries will bring in more restrictions, making it even more difficult in January.
I think there's a danger that other governments around the world put in place tougher measures because they're at an earlier stage in the cycle of Omicron than the UK is. The UK seems at the moment to be getting through this by putting in place perhaps cautious guidance and advice rather than tougher restrictions in the UK itself. And that means that the spike is happening faster than might be in other countries. So the concern is that other countries put in place measures to stop UK citizens travelling. And that would be my concern, that January itself sees a wide range of restrictions in place, which put off people from travelling further. There's no doubt 2022 is going to be a strong year in terms of bookings and confidence once we get through this wave of Omicron. The problem is it's getting through the next month or so and no cash coming in for much of the travel sector. That's going to hurt those smaller businesses that will find it difficult to survive.
And that as much has been made about the help offered to hospitality, but the travel industry hasn't received much in the way of government help. So what do they want?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a point that's been made by many within the travel industry, that they haven't had the government grants in the same way. So many are urging for that, but many are really also urging that we need to have a much more streamlined process like we had with the Delta variant. And there's too much form filling and testing that's needed. So, for example, I'm going to be hopefully flying to Cyprus on the 1st of January. I've got to do a test when I arrive back into the UK. I've got to book a PCR a couple of days later. That's very expensive for a lot of people, and it's very, very off-putting. So many in the travel sector are saying this is unnecessary, we don't need it, we need to have a much more streamlined process. So many within the sector, that's the main thing they want to take away, but also they're wanting extra financial help for the sector. And also there's many who are also arguing that we need to bring back furlough, because of course the travel sector is so vital to the UK economy, and many are saying there's been some additional support, although only recently, for hospitality, and that really needs to be brought in to the travel sector, and quite urgently.
Alice Porter, thank you very much for that update.
Now, if you're an England cricket fan, you've just woken up, I would do yourself a favour and roll over and go back to sleep. Because England have been completely humiliated by Australia in the cricket. Joe Root's side surrendered the Ashes on the morning of the third day of the third test in Melbourne, as Australia crushed England by an innings and 14 runs to take an unbeatable 3-0 series lead. Well, the result means Australia have retained the Ashes after just 12 days of cricket. They'll be hoping to seal a 5-0 whitewash. The fourth test will begin in Sydney on January the 4th.
Yeah, it's not looking good. No. Joe Root is actually on the front of the Telegraph today, not looking very happy. Telegraph is reporting he's going to decide at the end of the Ashes whether to stay captain. Apparently his soul searching has begun after the humiliation of the Ashes.
As well as his soul, they need to find some batters.
That's very true.
Anyway, let's just show you what else is going on today here on the Great British Breakfast, and there'll be no further COVID restrictions in England before the new year. Health Secretary Sajid Javid said people should remain cautious and celebrate outside on New Year's Eve if possible. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said ministers would continue to monitor the data and urged people to get their first, second or booster jab without delay. Meanwhile, both England and Scotland reported record cases over Christmas.
As we were just hearing, France has announced tighter COVID restrictions amid concerns over the Omicron variant. From the 3rd of January, remote working will become compulsory for those who can, and public gatherings will be limited to 2,000 people for indoor events. The news comes as France recorded more than 100,000 new infections on Saturday, the highest number reported in the country since the pandemic began. But the Prime Minister stopped short of implementing a New Year's Eve curfew.
Now, new rules for hospitality in Wales have left some customers confused while others stayed away. That's according to some bar owners there. Since Boxing Day, 2 metre social distancing returned in Wales, along with mask wearing, table service and contact tracing. Groups have also been limited to a maximum of 6 people to slow the spread of the Omicron variant. One bar owner said it's been a nightmare trying to enforce the new rules, as many people just aren't aware.
Ministers are under growing pressure to protect households from soaring energy costs as they face the threat of their household bills doubling in a year. Estimates sent by Ofgem, the energy regulator, to MPs this month said that the price cap was set to rise by 40% in April unless action was taken, with average bills reaching more than £1,800.
The number of people taking advantage of post-Christmas sales on Monday fell by 32% compared with 2019, according to the latest data. It's amid persistent COVID concerns. Retail analyst Springboard said footfall figures were better than Boxing Day, but popular shopping destinations such as central London saw a drop, caused in part by disruption to rail services. Shoppers chose to visit retail parks on Monday, but footfall there was still down 7.2% from pre-pandemic levels.
The Taliban have said Afghan women seeking to travel long distances by road should be offered transport only if accompanied by a male relative. The directive, issued on Sunday, is the latest curb on women's rights since the Islamist group seized power in August. The majority of secondary schools remain shut for girls, whilst most women have been banned from working. Campaign group Human Rights Watch said the new restriction moved further towards making women prisoners.
More than 1,100 asylum seekers have falsely claimed to be children over the past year. That's according to the latest official figures. 2 out of 3 of all cases where age was disputed and resolved were found to be 18 years or older. It's the highest number since the Home Office began recording the figures in 2006.
And today's weather, outbreaks of heavy rain will progress eastwards across central regions of the UK. Elsewhere, it will be drier with bright spells and just the odd isolated shower. A windy day to the south.
You're watching the Great British Breakfast. It's 6:30. Now, prostate cancer screening could be possible in the next 5 years, according to one of the UK's leading cancer voices. Professor Ros Eales at the Institute for Cancer Research claims the progress is possible because of recent advances in genetics and medical imaging. Every year, around 50,000 men in the UK are diagnosed with the disease, and over a fifth of people sadly die.
Mammogram screening for breast cancer has already been a huge success around the world. Well, joining us now is oncologist and former chief of the World Health Organization's cancer program, Dr. Carol Sikora. Good morning to you, Carol. Hope you had a lovely Christmas. Thank you very much for joining us. Just how significant would this prostate screening be?
It really would be. I mean, prostate cancer is a disease of later life. Most men are actually over 70. The average is 72. And they tend to ignore symptoms. They get a little trouble getting up to pee in the night, and they do nothing about it. And that's the problem. Most prostate cancer, the majority, actually doesn't kill you. It just grows very slowly, and usually you can live a normal life living with the cancer. But in around 20%, it does. It spreads and kills. And if you could pick those patients up, and what Ros Eales was talking about, using new genetic techniques to pick up those patients that have a cancer that does need treating early, and that's the whole basis of what she's talking about.
My personal experience, Carol, is that actually the NHS has been fantastic, that the screening has been exemplary. I just think people, in the last 5 years, there's been a remarkable change in attitude to prostate cancer and awareness of it.
I think the problem is, the cancers we can screen for, breast we've already mentioned, but also cervical cancer, which has been going for years, doing cervical smears, even before I was a medical student. And then, of course, colon cancer. So everybody is targeted, the right age group is targeted. And as you say, the NHS has done a wonderful program of doing that. Obviously, it's been knocked by the dreaded COVID, but I think prostate cancer is the one that's missing. And we do have a test, the PSA, the prostate antigen, but the problem with the PSA is it's not specific enough. It's high in many men where the prostate has benign enlargement, not cancer. And all these people have to have an MRI, they have to be investigated, and they get worried for no reason. So getting a better test and actually targeting the test to the men that actually have a higher risk genetically of prostate cancer would make such good sense. An MRI is expensive. It costs over £1,000 in the NHS to do one. You don't want to be using that as a screening tool. But some little blood tests based on the genetic factors would be tremendous.
Carol, lots of people will be asking why this has taken so long to come about. I mean, we've spoken there about the success of breast cancer screenings. From the age of 25, women are invited for cervical cancer smears every 3 to 5 years. It's a surprise, really, that this has taken so long.
It is. I mean, the 4 common cancers are colon, breast, lung, and prostate. Prostate is one of the big ones. About 50,000 men each year in the UK get it, and about 12,000 men die from it. What we have to work out is, can we pick up the ones that are going to die in advance, treat them early, and stop that? And that's the whole strategy here. It's taken longer for prostate cancer, perhaps because it is such a diverse disease. At one end, you've got a disease that doesn't kill you, doesn't do anything. You live with it for many, many years. On the other hand, you've got a disease that's very aggressive, spreads, and you die within a year. So that's the problem. It is such a different type of disease compared to, say, breast cancer, but also to the other 2 common cancers.
Yeah, the other main problem is, and it's one word, isn't it? Men. We're just hopeless. We bury ourselves, don't we? We don't confront something that's facing us.
You're completely correct that there's a difference in how people access healthcare all over the world, but particularly in Western Europe and particularly in Britain, when accessing the NHS can be difficult. You get rebuffed by the receptionist at the GP. You're told you're not really important. You have to wait. You have to make several calls. It doesn't happen quickly. It's not like buying a budget air ticket, which you just click on the web and it comes out 5 minutes later without any training. Trying to use the NHS is much more complex. And men are just much more easily put off than women when they try to get things for themselves. It's interesting. They look after their wives and their partners better than they look after themselves. And that's the way it is. And maybe we have to redesign the system to make it more user-friendly to men. But there'll be an outcry if I said that. So I think both sectors have good healthcare.
Carol, I'm interested, how has the pandemic affected the number of men that are being treated for prostate cancer? And are you pleased to see that there'll be no new COVID restrictions yet, anyway, in England?
The lack of restrictions is really good news. I think the problem with COVID is it stops you getting the MRI, for example, the magnetic resonance scan, which is the first point of call once you've got an abnormality, such as an enlarged prostate or a raised PSA. So once you've got that, you need to have the imaging, and then you need to have a biopsy. And the problem with COVID, it means you're restricting the numbers of people that can have a scan and the number of people that can have a biopsy, because simply you have to disinfect the room between patients, and that costs time, and therefore it results in a reduction in numbers of people getting scanned. So as we come out of COVID, hopefully, we'll get back to normal. And there has been a reduction of all cancers across the board over the last 12 months.
Professor Carol Sikora, it's really good to see you, and I really mean that, because I nearly ran you over. You were crossing Marylebone High Street the other day. You didn't see me, but I saw you. Anyway, good to see you, and speak to you soon. That's Carol Sikora there.
Yeah, glad he's still living to tell the tale,
He's very
Simon.
lucky, very lucky. My brakes are good.
Coming up, social media in 2021, misinformation, the metaverse, and the explosion of TikTok. We'll talk to a leading tech journalist.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Great British Breakfast with Ellie and Simon. It's 20 minutes to 7. Let's go through the big stories of the day in the papers this morning. Joining us, Benjamin Butterworth from the iPaper and the former Labour advisor, Scarlett Maguire. We must touch on what is the main story in most of the papers, and this is the decision in England, at least, not to introduce new COVID measures for New Year, and it has been widely welcomed, Benjamin.
Well, yeah, everyone's going to welcome being able to have a New Year's Eve party, but of course there are going to be people, maybe quite a lot of people, who get sick afterwards, or at the very least have to isolate for 7 to 10 days because they get COVID. And the government is taking a gamble here because Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, their new restrictions have come into force in the last 48 hours. You know, England is the only place. If you want to spend New Year's Eve in a nightclub, then you're going to have to stay in England because
There are a couple of things there, Benjamin. And actually, do you know, and we saw this before Christmas, I think people are going to be really restrained. I don't think people will want to get together at New Year's. This issue of personal responsibility, we all know how we should best behave to avoid COVID. And I think that seems to be how people are behaving. And that's what the Prime Minister, I guess, is depending on, Scarlett.
Yes, I think he is, but I think the real problem is all the cancellations and what happens to the businesses. I mean, because we saw that before Christmas, all the Christmas parties were cancelled, and for many pubs, restaurants, hotels, December is their great month. They've had a terrible 2 years. They were looking forward to December, and a lot of them are going to go bust. And they're going to go bust, and the government is saying, well, it's not really our fault, it's other people's fault. And so I think it's actually very difficult in this stage that it's only by putting restrictions that you can say, yes, we are going to take the government, we the taxpayers are going to take some financial hit. And otherwise, we're going to lose a lot of pubs in the next few months.
Yeah, I think that's the difficulty, isn't it? Because I'm certainly not gagging for a lockdown. They're pretty unpleasant things to go through, right? But actually, if you put yourself in the shoes of those pubs and those restaurants, well, in a way, they're in a better position when they're locked down and have government money and furlough, because at least they know the bottom line of their business through that period. What you saw in those 2 weeks running up to Christmas is that people were cancelling their bookings en masse after the food had been bought, after the drinks had been bought, perishable items that are costing them a fortune and put them in a much worse situation. And I think, even though a lot of people will be pleased if they live in England that you don't have restrictions this week, a lot of businesses I've spoken to on my reporting are actually saying, for God's sake, tell us if something's round the corner, because we'd rather know so we can plan for it.
The big dance at nightclubs on New Year's Eve is going to be the border hop, isn't it? It's nipping over into England. I just made that up. I thought it was quite good. Yeah.
I think that's pretty good. I suspect sort of Carlisle nightclubs will be thriving as people cross the border.
Yes.
But Scarlett, this is about politics, isn't it? I mean, Boris Johnson would not get a lockdown over the line. And the second part of this is, would the public even follow a lockdown if one was mandated? I mean, after all the Tory parties that we were seeing in the last few weeks, the people are angry. They feel very much like it was one rule for us and one rule for them.
Well, I mean, it certainly does feel that it's one rule for us and another for them, and they can do what they want. And I think there's probably, unfortunately, still a lot more to come out. But actually, I mean, I think that there's both the anger and why should we obey anything that they say because they're not doing it, and but we are worried about COVID. I mean, certainly in my family Christmas, one of my sisters I did not see at all because she was worried about catching it. She was actually more worried for her stepdaughter who needed to go back to Thailand to work, and that family, and her daughter-in-law who was pregnant. And my cousin would only see me for a walk. So actually, I think people are doing it themselves. But it is that problem of not being able to, of not going to the pubs going. But, and also, I mean, I didn't see my son over Christmas because he got COVID. I mean, the other thing is that people are having to isolate for the... And nobody knows whether it's a week or 10 days, by the way, and nobody understands. I mean, my son said, it's great, Mum, you could come and see me on Christmas Day and take me down if I'm negative. I mean, it's just hopeless, actually, that why did we change from 7 to 10 to 7 days? Because what the real problem is nobody trusts that Boris is following the science.
But if I'd add to that, I think the reason they went from 10 days to 7 days with 2 negative test results is because of the scale of infections. You know, many industries, but the NHS, the most acute of them all, are at risk of not being able to function properly because so many people are isolating. You know, there are 19,000 NHS workers self-isolating because they have COVID at the moment. Now, that's a situation where even if you don't have ICU beds filling up with seriously sick people, you could still struggle to do many of the normal functions because so many people can't go into hospital and into their healthcare outlets. And I think that's why the government had to cut it from 10 to 7 days, because even if this is less dangerous, you still have so many practical problems from 100,000 new cases every day.
No, and while of course you're right, there is a problem that people go into hospital with one thing and then they catch COVID. I mean, you know, and particularly vulnerable people. I mean, what we don't know, and it'd be very interesting to find out, is how many of the COVID deaths actually are people who are already vulnerable. They catch it in hospital and then they die.
Well, this is a massive issue, isn't it? Because these daily figures, people who've died within 28 days of a positive COVID test, dying with COVID and of COVID are very different things.
Yeah, no, I mean it's completely. I mean and that's the problem of the lack of transparency, and that's what I mean. So when you have various people interpreting, and they can be, you know, pundits, Tory MPs, whatever, saying, well, the scientists haven't really got it right because, I mean, actually they know no more about the figures than we do, and they're just saying this is what could happen, and actually we need data that we can trust. We need data that we can interrogate so we really, really understand what's going on. And nobody is explaining the deaths in hospital yet.
Right, you two. Well, we're enjoying this so much. We're going to get you back. Scarlett, Benjamin, thank you very much for that. And as I say, we'll have you back in the next half hour or so. Thank you.
Now, after an internal government meeting yesterday, Prime Minister Boris Johnson did not announce further restrictions to control the Omicron variant in England. This was after he was briefed on the impact that Christmas has had on COVID infections and hospital pressures. But what do people in the country think about the Prime Minister's approach? Well, our reporter Anna Riley spoke to people in Yorkshire to get their views. Anna, good morning to you. What are people saying to you?
Good morning. Yes, the government has resisted calls to go as far as Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland in introducing curbs on social mixing. Health Secretary Sajid Javid said yesterday that people should remain cautious, and he urged those marking the start of 2022 to consider testing themselves before and to celebrate outside, alongside additional calls for people to get jabbed and get boosted if they can. But restrictions could still change at a later date if data on hospitalisations suggests the NHS could be overwhelmed by a wave of coronavirus infections. It comes as Boris faced warnings from within the cabinet, from his restrictive backbenchers, not to overreact, as well as the hospitality industry urging Mr Johnson to hold firm amid hopeful signs that Omicron is not as dangerous as the previous variants. It comes as Christmas takings are already down in the hospitality industry by 40%. On pre-pandemic levels, and pubs warned that a bad New Year's Eve could push many over the edge. The latest UK infection data shows that more than 98,500 people tested positive in the previous 24 hours. But with studies showing that Omicron, with the risk of Omicron, the risk of hospitalisation is 50 to 70% lower than Delta. Here in Yorkshire, 11,222 people tested positive for COVID yesterday. I took to the streets of Hull to find out what people think to the government's response to this latest variant.
Let people enjoy it this year and then bring it in. But to bring it, it's going to affect a lot of businesses, obviously. A lot of people have already gone out of business where we used to go, so now we're having to shop elsewhere. So unfortunately that's going to affect people anyway, as we've seen over the last year. So yeah, I think it would be a good idea to bring it in because it's getting a little bit out of hand now again.
Just get on with it and carry on how we are. Yeah, carry on how we are and just live with it. Like, it's not fair, is it? Like, we're going to be stuck with it for a long time. We haven't got a cure for it, so yeah.
I just think he needs to decide what he's going to do.
and stop leaving us in the lurch right now. No one knows what we're doing, do we? And that's it.
I think the COVID situation and all what's been done for us has been absolutely fabulous with our injections, our booster. But I still do believe that we still should be very, very careful. You know, I still think that people should still take care because we don't really know when this is going to finish. Or, you know, we've got to still look after each other and everybody else around us and just make sure that, fingers crossed, that it will get better. But for now, I'm still keeping my mask on because it's hiding me wrinkles as well.
I think it's disgusting. I think you should get another lockdown now. Definitely. Because it's not now it's get changing.
They're not too bad. I think he's doing all right at the minute. Can't do much more, can he?
So some real mixed opinions from people here in Yorkshire on the government's response. Certainly, though, a sigh of relief for people working in hospitality at the moment and for people with plans for New Year's Eve.
Anna, thank you very much. That's Anna Riley with us live, and we'll have more from her throughout the programme.
Now, the internet has been blamed for causing everything from Brexit to today's mental health crisis. Hate speech, unrealistic beauty images and terrorist recruiters can all be found there. But it's also history's greatest ever source of information, education, media and, of course, memes. This year gave us Jackie Weaver, sulking Bernie Sanders and Oprah.
Well, 2021 has also been the year social media platforms have come under intense scrutiny, most notably here in the UK. We've had the online harms bill and special parliamentary committees looking at this. So in 2022, will we see the metaverse or more misinformation, higher taxes for tech firms or a crackdown on free speech? Well, joining us now, Will Guyot, who's the tech journalist and online commentator. Good morning to you.
Morning.
TikTok, let's start with that, because the speed of its expansion is incredible, and suggestions it's going to be bigger than Facebook.
Well, TikTok has actually outperformed Google this year in terms of the amount of online traffic. There's more people using TikTok and it's taking up a bigger share of the internet traffic than Google for the first time ever. We should probably just show you just how popular that platform has become. And Simon, it's impenetrable to people of your age and my age, but everybody else is now increasingly getting into TikTok and it's becoming a platform that will grow bigger and bigger.
TikTok. I'm on TikTok and I was on it a couple of weeks ago. Yes.
I like the fact you were on it a couple of weeks ago because it's been around for a good couple of years. But the point I'm trying to make
what
is
I meant
more
was I was
of us
viral on it, is what I meant.
You went viral. More and more of us are going to be joining TikTok over the next few years, and it's the platform that's the fastest growing. But there's big concerns about TikTok and its Chinese ownership. Now, TikTok itself, ByteDance, the owners of it, are at pains to say they're not the Chinese platform. There's two different versions of TikTok. There's a Chinese version called Douyin and the version that we use here. But there is a concern about information from the Western world passing into China. But TikTok, for actions speaking louder than words, seem to be the one social network at the moment that really does seem to be engaging with the government, engaging with organisations like the for the protection of children, working on safeguarding young users. All the other platforms do it, but it would appear to me as an expert of the industry who worked at one point at Facebook that TikTok really have started trying to build those bridges and have those conversations and also try and keep young people safe.
Well, good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. What do you think about 2022 being the year that large tech companies actually pay some taxes? And Amazon and Facebook and Apple have all been accused of not paying a fraction, really, of what they actually owe.
I do get quite frustrated when we get into a situation at pointing out tech companies for not paying taxes. Lots of people exploit these laws, and as somebody that worked at one of those companies, I certainly paid plenty of tax when it came to what I was earning. But I do agree with you that these companies, if they are benefiting from being part of the UK and the global ecosystem, they should be paying more back in. If there is this concern about addiction, or if there's concern about how they're working and how people are reacting to them, maybe these companies should be funding more of the support and help that people people need. There's obviously the very damning report from earlier this year where Instagram themselves called themselves a potentially toxic platform. Those are words we can't take away from their own internal report. But, well, Meta, the owners of Instagram, used to be known as Facebook, would say that they do a great deal to support young people. If you listen to healthcare officials or experts here in the UK, they would argue that there's not enough being done. So maybe the tech companies could be funding and supporting some of these treatments, but also education in schools and colleges. I don't think there is enough education about what to do if you feel you're being bullied or people are trolling you online. I don't think kids really get enough understanding of what they can do. And I don't even think schools, teachers, and even to some degree, police officers at a local level know what they should be doing in these situations. That should be much more clearly labelled, and maybe the tech companies could fund something to help remove that kind of hate and misinformation within 24 hours. That would be the gold standard.
Before we lose you, just tell us what your favourite meme was of 2021.
That's a really good one. I think for 2021, I quite like the Bernie Sanders meme. I'm a big consumer of the internet, and I don't necessarily sit there and say, hey, this is my favorite at any point. But what I would say is the number of memes and items now being used in daily life, ending up on popular t-shirts this Christmas, that sort of stuff. The whole idea of the internet image and the fact that something that can go, viral, like your good self, Simon, you're going to see more and more of that on t-shirts and other kinds of items, just because the internet becomes more acceptable and more mainstream.
Will, it's great to see you and your friend, that robot beside you. Will, thanks very much.
Coming up, will schools be forced to close in the new year due to COVID? The Prime Minister says they won't, but some head teachers disagree. But first, let's get some weather for you.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning, it's your Great British Breakfast with Simon McCoy and me, Ellie Costello.
And it's a happy new year in England as there are no new COVID restrictions announced. So is Boris Johnson right or wrong to do nothing? England is now the only country in the United Kingdom where you can go to a nightclub for New Year's Eve.
But you might struggle to get out of the country. Travel experts are warning of severe disruption over the new year as airline passengers have been hit by the grounding of thousands of flights due to staff shortages caused by COVID.
And it's certainly not a happy morning for England cricket fans. Joe Root's side was thumped 3-0 by Australia in the Ashes.
Yeah. It's the Great British Breakfast with Simon and Ellie.
OK, let's start by taking a look at some of today's newspaper front pages. We start with the Daily Mail. It leads with Boris's New Year cheer. The Mail's sources said nothing in the figures suggested that hospitals were about to be overwhelmed. It also highlighted the huge boost hospitality would get from the Prime Minister's decision.
The eye's gone for no new COVID restrictions before 2022. It says Boris Johnson made the decision after receiving pre-Christmas data. It also says that the NHS is not facing an exponential rise in hospital admissions, although it is still under pressure. This is made worse by thousands of workers being off sick with coronavirus.
The headline in The Times is no COVID curbs on New Year's parties. It also highlights the plight of consumers, saying household energy bills are set to double. The average price of energy bills could reach more than £1,800, according to estimates sent by Ofgem to ministers.
The Express has gone for dire warning energy bills could double. It says soaring gas and electricity prices will cause an enormous crisis next year.
A bit of doom and gloom on the front of the Mirror. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is a no-show despite record COVID crisis and NHS staff shortages. Uncertainty reigns. Even New Year's Eve celebrations are going ahead, though.
And on the Telegraph as well, no new restrictions on New Year's Eve. Another story on the cover is energy. Bills could triple unless a £20 billion fund is set up to help. That's what ministers have warned.
On the front of the Star, Happy New Beer, celebrating no lockdown and balmy temperatures of 15 degrees with hopefully a cold beer, it says.
Well, this morning we have a panel to go through the stories inside the papers. Benjamin Butterworth from the iPaper and former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire join us all morning, and you've been fantastic so far, so please do keep it up. Benjamin, let's start with you. And we've got to talk about New Year, haven't we? Boris's New Year cheer on the Daily Mail, but it does mean that England is now the outlier. Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland have all got restrictions of some form. Who's in the right here? They can't all be right.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? You know, I actually think that it's possible Boris Johnson could be proved to be right because the other nations introduced their restrictions before we had the data on how many hospitalisations there are from this Omicron variant, right? And the evidence says that you're 50 to 70% less likely to be hospitalised. Now, that's a lot better than people forecast. The problem is that when you're having 100,000 cases a day, 120,000 cases a day on one of the days a few days ago, then actually you have a situation where the number of new cases outstrips the limited risk of being hospitalised. And that's the gamble that Boris Johnson is taking right now. You know, I think that in the next week or so, hospitalisations probably aren't going to rocket. There were, I think, 278 new hospitalisations on Christmas Day in London. Now, the government said if it gets over 400 a day in London, which is leading the curve of this variant, then they'll have restrictions. Well, we're nowhere near that right now. But the risk is that as this spreads and you have hundreds of thousands a day, then you could get to mid-January and ICUs be back in a situation like like they were in February of this year.
And Scarlett, this is one in the eye for Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford, isn't it?
Well, I think only time will tell is what they're saying. Is that at the moment it certainly looks as though England is going down the right path. But the problem is that because nothing's being, or very, very little is being done to stop the virus spreading, we've got, as your news said, we've got staff shortages in travel, staff shortages in hospitals, staff shortages everywhere, because as soon as you get Omicron, and it is amazing how many people are doing lateral flow tests every day, but for some reason or other they want to visit elderly relatives or however. As soon as they get it, that's it, 7 days, they're off work, they can't see anybody. So actually, even without restrictions, we're in a very, very strange place.
And Benjamin, there is a valid question, I was going to say, because the number of people doing tests has shot up considerably. You know, the body that deals with testing is sending out 1 million home tests a day, 11 million a week to pharmacies in the week running up to Christmas. So actually, you're probably picking up a lot of people who wouldn't have known they had COVID if they'd got this a couple of months ago, but now are feeling a pressure, or because of the nature of seeing relatives at Christmas, they've been testing regularly. So, you know, some of it might just be that there's a better pickup of who's got COVID and who hasn't.
I mean, how much do restrictions actually need to be mandated? I mean, I think really the general public, we are very sensible. We saw that behaviour before Christmas, people cancelling their tables, cancelling their parties, and people are very happy, as you just said, Scarlett, to test and to isolate if they do test positive. I mean, how much do we even need that to be mandated to us anymore?
Well, I think pubs and restaurants will say that's all very well, but we have to deal with the cancellations. We have to even close because there aren't enough staff. And as long as it's not mandated, then it's everybody for themselves. And what the pubs and the restaurants say is, we want to know what's going on, because actually we need financial help if this is going to continue. We cannot go on. We lost masses and masses of money over Christmas. I mean, this is absolutely terrible for hospitality and for travel. And are we going to have lots and lots of bankruptcies and unemployment after Christmas, or are we going to help these people? And that is a real issue.
But I do have a theory that people are going to be less reluctant to go to busy venues like pubs or even nightclubs now that Christmas is over. I think a lot of people were doing it because they didn't want to be locked up alone, you know, in their mum's spare bedroom, isolating over Christmas, right? That would have been pretty rubbish. You know, I saw, as I scrolled through Instagram this morning, a bunch of my friends were in the nightclub GOI Heaven in central London, and it was full. I was completely shocked, but I think people were being super sensible, super cautious, because they didn't want to ruin Christmas. I dare say as you go into January, people might be a lot more reluctant, especially now we have that evidence that this Omicron variant is less dangerous to the vast majority of people.
Yeah. Well, there's a question, interesting, is whether January is going to be the new December, right? Is that all of us who had our parties cancelled and had to stay in through December actually will go out and have a good time in January, and the pubs will be full.
Yeah, I think much more interesting is Benjamin's reaction to seeing all his friends out at a nightclub. But we'll move on. I want to talk about the Welsh Government, actually, because it's banned its staff from using certain terms like Brexit. And there are some other crackers in this one. Benjamin.
Well, I mean, do you know what? It might seem odd to ban the term Brexit, but if you cast your minds back, that's what Boris Johnson did when he took office. He wanted to call this the transition period, which is what the Welsh Government has said, because he didn't want people to obsess over the Brexit divide that we'd had after he won that landslide general election. So, you know, I think maybe this is part of trying to move on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that actually we do need to move on, frankly, is that Brexit divided Britain. Nearly half and half. It was terrible. It got toxic, and we are where we are. We're on the other side of it, and we now have to deal with it. Instead of saying, "Oh, but all of this is about what happened a few years ago,
Yeah.
is we need to just say this is live.
This is all about the devolved government's website, which is updated as style guide, first published back in 2019. Staff must also say non-disabled rather than able-bodied, and it must be the UK government, never HM government. I mean, and you sort of think, aren't there other things we should be worrying about?
Yeah, I mean, that the non-disabled, it's very odd. I feel like that, I'm not sure who asked for that. Sometimes they call them accessible toilets rather than disabled toilets. I don't lose sleep over that. That seems sensible. But non-disabled is that's a contortion of the English language, surely. As for UK government, I mean, I think that's already standard practice to talk about it like that, isn't it? If you were reporting on it, you'd call it the UK government rather than Her Majesty's government, because I think it sounds a little bit odd to say Her Majesty's government, even if it's true. Yeah,
it works in a James Bond film, and that's about it, doesn't it?
Yes, I think we all like to think ourselves as citizens rather than subjects.
Hey, I'm happy to be a subject of Her Majesty, but that's a whole other debate.
Oh, well, no, me too. Actually, it's a debate we should have at some point.
Well, do let us know what you think about that. I think there'll be a lot of people at home that have an opinion on that one. This is the Welsh Government saying staff must say non-disabled rather than able-bodied, and they don't want the government to be referred to as Her Majesty's government, but rather the UK government. Let us know, gbnews@gbnews.uk, and we'll read some of those out later.
Benjamin Scarlett, we'll see you later on.
Well, let's
Time
talk
for another coffee.
Let's talk some more about Boris Johnson's decision not to let New Year's Eve celebrations go ahead. I'm about to cause mass panic there. Right. Across England, the move comes as new data showed no justification for imposing new or additional rules. This is in stark contrast to Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, who have reintroduced some of the COVID rules, such as safe distancing and wearing of masks in public places.
Joining us now, Professor Azim Majid, Professor of Primary Care and Public Health at Imperial College in London. First of all, did this surprise you? Because the warnings all along have been about the pressure on the NHS, not so much from the patients coming in, but the staff who were going to fall ill as well.
I wasn't surprised because all the soundings from the government were they weren't going to go for extra measures. That does place England, away from other countries like Ireland, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, and also in places like France and Germany, which are bringing measures. So it does make England an outlier, but it's not surprising, I think, given what people like Boris Johnson are saying in recent days.
And Professor, who is actually in hospital with Omicron right now? And how bad is the situation? How many of those people are then having to be moved into ICU or need ventilation?
So it is, there are high numbers being admitted now. They're not as high as the peak as we saw at the start of this year in January, but still quite high numbers, particularly in London. So those most at risk are those who are either elderly or unvaccinated, so they have the highest risk of serious illness and hospital admission. So the message is, if you're not vaccinated, please go out and get your vaccine, because that will protect you no matter what your age. So it's a mixture of people, like some elderly and some unvaccinated.
How would you rate how the NHS is at the moment? Is it on the edge, or has it perhaps got over the worst? What's your experience from the front line?
So the NHS has coped quite well, but it is facing a lot of pressures at the moment. One, as you mentioned briefly, is staff being on sick leave. That's causing a lot of pressure, often more so than the number of people being admitted. Often is the fact you're lacking a lot of staff, which means you can't offer the same level of care. The issues were still quite early on in this Omicron wave, and so we won't see the full effects of the wave until later in January. So other people are being optimistic. I think people need to be cautious for the next few weeks because we'll understand the full impact for a few more weeks.
So you wouldn't encourage people to head out on New Year's Eve?
Yeah, like your previous columnist, Benjamin's friends, I would advise caution for the next few weeks until we pass the worst of this wave.
And of course, as you said, there are people in hospital, in the ICU with Omicron. How many people are actually coming into hospital and contracting it there? Because that's the other issue, if it's this transmissible.
Yeah, so this strain is more infectious than previous strains, so there's a high risk. If you go to hospital for some other medical problem, you will end up catching Omicron. The same applies to healthcare staff as well. A lot of those are also getting infected as well in hospitals. So hospitals are high-risk environments, which is why I want to, obviously prevent people going to hospital if we can do that through other measures. And that's another reason we're trying to bring down infection rates in the community.
Have you changed your plans for New Year's Eve?
Yes, so I've had a low-profile Christmas, and I have a low-profile New Year's Eve as well. So I'll stay at home with my family rather than going out to a party or a social event externally.
Okay, well, nevertheless, enjoy it. It's really good to speak to you.
I will enjoy it.
On the best, we don't cross paths before New Year. Have a very happy New Year, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That was Professor Azim Majid. He's Professor of Primary Care and Public Health at Imperial College here in London.
Now, travel experts are warning of severe disruption over the new year as airline passengers have been hit by the grounding of thousands of flights due to staff shortages by COVID. Around 8,000 flights were cancelled globally between Christmas Eve and Boxing Day, and there she is. She's been there for a while. Our London reporter, Alice Porter, joins us now. And let's just talk about the issue at the moment. Papers full of stories of a nightmare over Christmas for anybody trying to get anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. The latest figures that we've got show that around 3,000 flights were cancelled yesterday. 54 of them are flights coming in or out of Heathrow, which we know is, of course, the UK's busiest airport. So it really gives an indication of the scale of the problem. Now, normally at this time of year, when flights get grounded, it's because of bad weather. But sadly, it's very much because of coronavirus, but particularly because of Omicron. And that's leading to staff shortages. And it means simply flights can't take off. It's a real problem, particularly in the US, particularly in China, but that has a knock-on effect around the world, and it's causing a huge amount of disruption at a really, really peak time. I mean, a lot of people use Christmas, the New Year period, to visit family, particularly because travel has been so limited over the last couple of years or so. So sadly, it's obviously been such a difficult time for the travel industry, and quite simply, they really need those planes to take off.
And Alice, we heard from Professor Azim Majid there, who's saying that we're still at the the start of this wave, really, and things could get worse in January. What's the travel situation looking like there, and what are the fears for that?
I know, I think that's the concern. I mean, let's look at the UK first. So the travel sector was starting to recover towards the end of this year. And then sadly, Omicron came. And so the timing of that meant that the government understandably wanted to stop the spread of it. And so they brought in more testing, more PCR testing. But the knock-on effect of that is it makes travelling simply less appealing for travellers, and that has an impact on the airlines as well. So the demand isn't there in that we would see normally for this time of year, and that the concern is that if these restrictions continue, then that can have a knock-on effect, and we could see a downturn in the sector, which is really, really, really not needed. But let's just say you're happy to do your PCR, you're happy to go away and do your form filling. Where do you go? I mean, France and Germany have made it quite clear that they're not wanting travellers from the UK. Austria followed suit, and it's quite restrictive. You have to have had your boost. So, for example, somebody who might want to go skiing, very popular at this time of year, that's not going to such an attractive destination. So you've got that as well. And then, of course, there's travel disruption at the moment. And so if anyone wanted to do a last-minute getaway, it's not looking very appealing as well. And the concern is we've seen these countries in Europe start to bring in restrictions. And the worry is that could that get worse as we look to January? That's something that travel expert Paul Charles was telling me.
I think there's a danger that other governments around the world put in place tougher measures because they're at an earlier stage in the cycle of Omicron than the UK is. The UK seems at the moment to be getting through this by putting in place perhaps cautious guidance and advice rather than tougher restrictions in the UK itself. And that means that the spike is happening faster than might be in other countries. So the concern is that other countries put in place measures to stop UK citizens travelling. And that would be my concern, that January itself sees a wide range of restrictions in place, which put off people from travelling further. There's no doubt 2022 is going to be a strong year in terms of bookings and confidence once we get through this wave of Omicron. The problem is it's getting through the next month or so, and no cash coming in for much of the travel sector. That's going to hurt those smaller businesses that will find it difficult to survive.
Analysis, it's already hit the big businesses. I mean, anecdotally, I had an electrician called out emergency yesterday, and he, up until 2 years ago, was a pilot. And he said many of his colleagues, former colleagues, are looking for work in any sector they can find it. The damage, to some extent, has already been done, and the fear is it will only get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, and the question is really I mean, what does the government need to do in order to improve the situation? And I mean, there's been a lot of cries of people wanting greater financial support for the travel sector in the same way that we've perhaps seen for hospitality quite recently. I mean, I've been speaking to quite a few industry experts, and one of the main things they keep saying is we've got to have a more simplified and streamlined process for people who do want to go abroad. And so more of a similar approach that we saw with the Delta variant, for example. I mean, if we look at the moment, what you have to do, so I'm meant to be going to Cyprus at the beginning of January. If I come back into the country, bearing in mind I have double vaxxed, I am boosted, I'm currently isolated with COVID, so I'm pretty secure and probably not having COVID. I'm still having to do a test before I arrive. I've got to do a PCR 2 days later. I'm having to isolate during that time. And that's really, really off-putting for travellers. It's very, very expensive. So many people with the industry are saying that this is unnecessary, this is too expensive, and it's putting off travellers when we really, really need them to be getting on flights and travelling around the world. So that's the sort of second issue as well. But also some people are saying we also need to bring back furlough, and that there needs to be more conversations over that. So the concern is, I think, that the government have got their next traveller review on the 5th of January, but it appears to be that there's not going to be any major changes by that date. Hopefully there might be something coming later within the month, but it sadly looks like it's still a very rocky few weeks ahead for the travel sector.
Alice Porter, thank you so much for that update there for us.
Coming up, the latest on the armed intruder who broke into Windsor Castle on Christmas Day and posted a video on social media threatening the Queen. First, the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Sorry.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Milk on my mouth, but it's fine. Got a cappuccino here. I was a bit worried I had froth on my mouth, but it's fine. Right, schools are drawing...
Should remain private.
Yeah. I don't want to embarrass myself on air.
Oh, I do every morning. Fine.
Schools are drawing up plans to send whole year groups home amid growing concern that the Omicron COVID variant will lead to staff shortages spiralling out of control in January. Jeff Barton, the General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders, told The Telegraph yesterday that head teachers were hoping for the best but planning for the worst.
However, Prime Minister Boris Johnson is reportedly absolutely determined to keep schools open in the new year, but will he manage it? Joining us now, Chris McGovern from the Campaign for Real Education. Chris, as ever, really good to see you. The head hopes that things can go ahead as normal. The heart tells you there's no way.
Well, yeah, I mean, you just reported that the head teachers are planning to send whole year groups home. What they should be planning for is to not send whole year groups home, to try to keep the schools fully open, because we know the consequences of closing the schools. What we know is that perhaps millions of children have suffered pretty drastically under the lockdown last time. And children from poor families in particular are suffering most of all, not least because quite often, certainly the children I work with now, even though I'm retired, the parents of these children, some of them can't read and write themselves, having been products of our education system. So they can't be helped by their parents. They've got poor facilities in terms of internet access, so they can't be taught effectively online. And so if we do, in fact, send whole year groups home, we're going to actually pay a very, very high price. And what we have to decide in this, is the price worth paying, or is there another way forward? And I think there probably is another way forward, and we should be planning for that.
OK, Chris, what's the other way forward then?
OK, so let's look at a country such as, well, let's look at China. China, by the age of 15, according to international comparisons, are about 3 years ahead of our children. They have class sizes about 70. Now, that sounds remarkable, doesn't it, how they can have huge class sizes and yet do so much better. So what we need to be doing is saying, OK, we're in a crisis. And in a crisis, we need to do things we wouldn't normally do. So rather than saying, let's have a class maximum size of 30, which we have now, we should say we can double up. We'll have a maximum class size of 60. Because, you know, there are many teachers who actually can teach a larger class. As a head teacher, I can remember teaching in the hall about 150 children because there was a snowstorm and many staff couldn't get in. You can do it. It's different. But if they can do it in China and get far better results, and in many other Asian countries, we can do it temporarily because the price we have to pay for sending children home is just too high. You're giving teachers an easier time, perhaps, if they're working at home, or maybe not. People will argue about that. But what we do know is that children are suffering. So we've got to put the children first, and we've got to keep the schools open. And if it means sometimes we've got to double up classes and find the space to do that and teach them in a very formal, old-fashioned didactic way with a teacher at the front, well, it works for the Chinese. They're doing pretty well. It works for the youngsters in Vietnam and in Singapore and in Taiwan and places. Well, in a short period of time, we can have larger classes. That's another way forward. So, yeah, either send them home or have larger classes. I'm sure the parents and the children would rather be in school.
Yeah, it sounds great, but any teacher I've spoken to, there is a real issue with discipline in schools at the moment, in classes, and also the parents of the children. Some teachers go through hell. That would be different in China, one suspects, that the authorities would be less amenable to parents shouting, "I know my rights," and children shouting, "I know my rights." Or am I getting this wrong?
Well, I was a teacher for 35 years. I know what it's about. If I can teach 150 kids, well, yeah, I can teach 60. Look, it is tough. It's really tough. And I know that. And I also know that if we say we're going to send the children home, price is too high to pay. So it's going to be really hard. We're in a situation which is extremely stressful. Some parents will complain, some parents will applaud, and they will say, I can now go to work, I can keep the economy running, I can pay the taxes to support the National Health Service because my child is in school. We can start closing schools or sending kids home when the hospitals start sending the nurses home and the doctors home. No, the schools have to have the same priority as the hospitals and certainly as the supermarkets. We'd all be saying, look, the supermarket's closed, how bad that is. Well, we expect supermarkets to stay open. We should expect schools to stay open. And it's really tough, really hard. But teachers have got to set up to the plate and do the job. It's tough and it's hard, but it's the only way forward. We must keep the schools open. And for once, I'm with Boris. Keep them open. And many teachers will agree with me, but they won't say so in public because their union bosses will come down heavy on them if they do.
And Chris, I mean, this is all about fears, isn't it, that those Christmas gatherings will have hastened the spread of Omicron. And January, looking ahead to when these schools hopefully do reopen without any problems with shortage of staff or students. But it is a time for mock exams, isn't it, for GCSEs and for A-levels in secondary schools. It's a really important time for them. What's the concern then if those students are sick, they miss those exams, or indeed if their teachers aren't there in those important weeks running up to exams?
Yeah, it is true that we don't know what's going to happen in the summer, whether there will be exams or not. And so teachers have been told to have mock exams now, more or less, at the start of the new year. And they'll be using those results to decide what grades the children will get in the summer. Look, my own view as far as that is concerned, I wouldn't worry over much about that because I think, the exam system at the moment is in total meltdown. We need to start again with this. We can't be depending on mock results marked by teachers for exam results. And I'd also say, although it's very fashionable to say, look, who matters most? It's the 16-year-old taking GCSEs and the 18-year-olds taking A-levels. I will say, no, that's completely and utterly wrong. What matters now, most importantly, are the 4-year-olds and the 5-year-olds. They can provide the building blocks. As a head teacher, and I spoke to new parents, I used to tell them when they came into my school, the most important year is the first year. Don't worry so much about the 18-year-olds, worry about the 8-year-olds and the 4-year-olds. That's where the building blocks of education are set down. So it's important, these exams, of course they are. I'm not trying to diminish that, but these mocks are only mocks. So I wouldn't overdo that. I would say focus as much as you can on helping the youngest, but they're more important than the oldest, oddly enough. And I'm sounding very heretical saying that, but it's true. 4-year-olds are more important than 14-year-olds.
You see, I'm terrified just sitting here listening to you. I wouldn't misbehave if I was in a class of 60 with you at the front there. I'm just wondering how you would respond to McCoy and Costello at the back. Behave yourselves. I mean, is there a discipline problem at the moment?
There's a disastrous discipline problem, but I tell you something. If you can teach, and I can teach, I was a so-called advanced skills teacher. I got a distinction for my postgraduate training, got a first-class degree. I can teach. And children, therefore, make progress. And the other thing is, when the children make progress, they tend not to muck about. But if they're sitting in groups with their backs to the teacher, not making progress, they get frustrated, particularly able children, and they know how to upset teachers. So you're absolutely right. There is a problem in many schools of discipline. Compared to those in, say, China, it's a disaster. But if you get good teaching, you don't get many discipline problems. And I can tell you invariably, you go into classrooms where there's little problem in terms of discipline, it's because the teaching is good. Not university true, but it's true most of the time. So you want good teachers, and they've got to be in control, yes. And none of this namby-pambing about, what do the children think all the time? No, you're the teacher, you're in charge, you tell the children what to do, don't give them the choice. And you know what? They appreciate that. The children love that. They want that. I can remember when I started in my early days of teaching a lad, a Friday afternoon history lesson, and he said he was going to watch Leeds United play Coventry City in their football match. He went. How did he get on, Michael? Made up that name. On the Monday, I asked him. He said, I was arrested. He went to court. I was teaching this lad, a bit of a thug. He was banned. 3 months later, I asked him on a Friday afternoon, what are you doing this weekend? I'm going to the football. No, you're not, Michael, because you're banned by the court. He says, no, I'm not. I can go with my father. He went with his dad, asked him on the Monday, how did you get on at the football, Michael? Did you get arrested? No, I didn't. He said, but my dad got arrested. Those are the sorts of kids. But I saw that lad 5 years later in a pub. He came up to me, he bought me a pint of beer, and he said, thank you. Because he knew he was under control. I told him what he had to do. No mucking about. And you need teachers to be in control. And the children crave for that. They crave that. They want that. And I, by the way, was not disliked as a teacher. On the contrary.
I thought you were going to say I saw him 5 years later and he was playing for Leeds United. Chris, thank you very much. I would not misbehave. Thank you very much. Fully attentive.
Well behaved as always, Simon. Coming up, what does the public think about the PM's latest COVID policies or lack of them for England? No new restrictions will be brought in before New Year's.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast with Simon McCoy and me, Ellie Costello. I forgot the name of the show there for a second. The father of a teenage suspect suspected of scaling Windsor Castle armed with a crossbow in a bid to assassinate the Queen in revenge for the 1919 Amritsar massacre today told the Mail Online something had gone horribly wrong with his son. Shocking video footage showing the crossbow-wielding man emerged last night after a 19-year-old who scaled the castle's spiked fence was sectioned. The footage shows the man, thought to be the arrested suspect, holding a black crossbow and using a distorted voice as he makes threats down the camera.
Well, let's get more on this with the royal commentator Ingrid Seward, Editor-in-Chief of Majesty magazine. Ingrid, very good morning to you. We love these royal close call stories, but the fact is that security in this case was worked to perfection. He just about scaled the wall and he was arrested. That's what security does.
Exactly. He posted the video of himself at sort of 8 o'clock in the morning, just after 8 in the morning, and then he scaled the gate. He scaled the wall with the help of a ladder just by the Cambridge gate. And literally within 2 minutes, he was apprehended because he was seen on CCTV footage, and that provoked alarms, and the police were literally there within 2 minutes. So, as far as security goes, it was a completely successful. I think what people are up in arms about is the fact that this obviously unhinged young man was able to even get that far. And, the newspapers love a story about royal security, especially around Christmas time. And there were apparently about, 18, 19 members of the royal family in residence at the time because they were there for the Queen's Christmas lunch. And the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall literally arrived sort of an hour later. Prince Andrew was on his way there and had to be diverted from the gate. So all in all, it got everybody in. So it was a very good royal story.
And Ingrid, I mean, some papers are reporting that he actually got as close as 500 metres away from the Queen's private apartment. I mean, not quite as close as Michael Fagan back in the Queen's bedroom in the 80s. But how much do you think that would have frightened the Queen, if at all?
Well, the Queen obviously didn't know about it until later, and I don't think he was that close. If he just scaled the Cambridge gate, he wasn't that close to the Queen's private apartments, but close enough to be a security problem. I think that whenever these things happen, there is a review of security, which is, probably always needed because it's such a huge area around Windsor that they have to protect. And of course, there are a lot of people around there, and people are able to get quite close to the castle, on public access. So it's always a problem at Windsor.
Yeah, I mean, each royal has their own security. They have their own security detail. And another story in the papers this morning that senior members of the royal family are concerned at proposals to change those that they have around them, those close protection officers. And history is littered with stories of how royals have got particularly close to some of their royal detail.
Well, it certainly is. I mean, they used to become very, very close to them because obviously you're going to become close to someone that you spend, a great deal of time with, a lot of your day. And, there have been, about Princess Diana and her royal security, Barry Manicky. We know about Princess Anne and Peter Cross. And there are lots and lots of stories like this because it's understandable that you get close to someone that you spend so much time with. So they started to, instead of having, one or two people that the royals knew really well, they started to move them around a bit more. And I think this is what's caused some of the problems because a lot of the security people aren't so familiar with the people that they're actually looking after. That's what I understand anyway.
Ingrid, as you say, this was swiftly and successfully dealt with this time, but the facts are this is the fifth person to breach security at Windsor in the last 9 months. Surely there's going to be some sort of security review now.
Oh, there will definitely be a security review. But the thing is that the royal family don't want to be kept as, prisoners, or they don't want to be like the President of the United States, just surrounded by security. They really dislike that. Part about being a member of the British royal family is to be visible and to be able to meet people and talk to ordinary people. And that is, part of the deal of being royal. So there's a very fine line. And I don't think they really enjoy, being surrounded by security all the time. But, in these times, it's obviously very necessary.
Yeah, come on, Ingrid. I could go to Windsor Castle now with a ladder. I'd be over the wall, and then they'd have to launch a security review. Any one of us can do it. The difference is, in this case, it's a bloke with a crossbow and mental health problems, but security acted very fast. Doesn't need a review. It works.
Well, I was just reading I don't know, something, maybe you're right, but I just, was reading what I said, and, somebody like Ken Wharf, who we all know was Diana's security officer. He said he thought it needed a review. It was a bit slack in Windsor. So I am bowing to other people's better judgment here.
Well, none of us will ever argue with Ken Wharf. Ingrid, it's lovely to see you. Thank you very much, Ingrid, for joining us there. And a Happy New Year to you.
Here's what else is going on today. There will be no further COVID restrictions in England before the new year. Health Secretary Sajid Javid said people should remain cautious and celebrate outside on New Year's Eve if possible. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said ministers would continue to monitor the data and urged people to get their first, second or booster jab without delay. Meanwhile, both England and Scotland reported record cases over Christmas.
Well, France has announced tighter COVID restrictions amid concerns over the Omicron variant there. From the 3rd of January, remote working will become compulsory for those who can, and public gatherings will be limited to 2,000 people for indoor events. The news comes as France recorded more than 100,000 new infections on Saturday. That's the highest number reported in the country since the pandemic began. But the Prime Minister stopped short of implementing a New Year's Eve curfew.
New rules for hospitality in Wales have left some customers confused, while others stayed away. That's according to some bar owners there. Since Boxing Day, 2-metre social distancing returned in Wales, along with mask wearing, table service and contact tracing. Groups have also been limited to a maximum of 6 people to slow the spread of the Omicron variant. One bar owner said it's been a nightmare trying to enforce the new rules, as many people just aren't aware.
Ministers are under growing pressure to protect households from soaring energy costs as they face the threat of their household bills doubling in a year. Estimates sent by Ofgem, the energy regulator, to ministers this month said that the price cap was set to rise by 40% in April unless action was taken, with average bills reaching more than £1,800.
The number of people taking advantage of the post-Christmas sales on Monday fell by 32% compared with 2019. That's according to new data, and that's amid persistent COVID concerns. Retail analyst Springboard said footfall figures were better than Boxing Day, but popular shopping destinations such as central London saw a drop caused in part by disruption to rail services. Shoppers chose to visit retail parks on Monday, but footfall there was still down 7.2% from pre-pandemic levels. That contrasted with a sharp drop in footfall on high streets, down 40% on 2019, and in shopping centres, which recorded a 38.8% decline.
The Taliban have said Afghan women seeking to travel long distances by road should be offered transport only if accompanied by a male relative. The directive, issued on Sunday, is the latest curb on women's rights since the Islamist group seized power in August. A majority of secondary schools remain shut for girls, while most women have been banned from working. Campaign groups, such as Human Rights Watch, say the new restrictions move further towards making women prisoners.
More than 1,100 asylum seekers have falsely claimed to be children over the past year. That's according to official figures. 2 out of 3 of all cases where age was disputed and resolved, they were found to be 18 years or older. It's the highest number since the Home Office began recording the figures in 2006.
England have embarrassingly, and that's putting it mildly, lost the Ashes on the morning of the 3rd day of the 3rd Test in Melbourne as Australia crushed Joe Root's side by an innings and 14 runs to take an unbeatable 3-0 series lead. Well, the result means Australia have retained the Ashes after just 12 days of actual cricket, and they'll be hoping to seal a 5-0 whitewash. The 4th Test will begin in Sydney on January the 4th, also known as Ritual Humiliation Day.
Today's weather. Outbreaks of heavy rain will progress eastwards towards central regions of the UK. Elsewhere, it will be drier with bright spells and just the odd isolated shower. A windy day to the south.
Well, let's have a look at the morning papers with our panel. Delighted to say this morning we've got Benjamin Butterworth from the iPaper and the former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire here to look through them. Good morning to you both. Let's start with the main story. And I haven't seen how the Scottish papers are dealing with this, but there's a sense of Boris Johnson 1, Drakeford and Sturgeon 0 at the moment because he's gone against the other nations.
Yeah, I think, so England isn't going to have new restrictions this week. That was what was confirmed yesterday. So if you want a night out dancing, if you want a full-blown New Year's Eve, well, you're going to have to come to England for it. Now, you put it sort of Boris Johnson 1, Sturgeon and Drakeford 0. I think that remains to be seen, right? Because we're going to see what happens to the number of people that get COVID, how many people get hospitalised in the coming weeks. There's usually a 2 to 3 week lag in terms of infection to people who get seriously ill. Now, there is some good news. I was looking at today's papers in today's Daily Mail, and it says that while the number of people with COVID is 4 times this day last year, the number of people in hospital is a fraction. It's less than half of the number of people that were hospitalised with COVID. So clearly it looks a lot like the Omicron variant is a lot less dangerous. I think the Boris Johnson gamble could pay off, but I don't think we'll be able to answer that question until about mid-January.
Scarlett.
Yes, the reason it's a gamble for Boris Johnson is actually not so much about the science, but about the politics, because what everybody knows is that the reason Boris Johnson did this is because his Conservative MPs are not backing him on restrictions. And there've been a lot of stories in the paper over Christmas about Tory MPs saying, don't do it, don't do it. And so actually the real problem is that nobody's quite sure why the decision has been taken. Is it on the data or is it on the politics? And that's why you're going to get a lot of people who are still very worried. And as before Christmas, a lot of people are not going to be going out, they're not going to be mixing because they're feeling unsafe. And what we really need is to know exactly what's going on and to be able to say, yes, this is all right. And I don't think it helps that we've got different rules in different parts of the UK, because actually Northern Ireland, it's not just Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford. Northern Ireland also doesn't agree with Boris Johnson. And still we've got London as the epicentre of the virus.
Well, Scarlett, Benjamin, thank you very much for your thoughts there on our top story of the day. Stay where you are. We're going to come back to you just after 8 o'clock. But that was Benjamin Butterworth from the iPaper and former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire there. And they're with us all morning.
Now, let's move on. We've got a rather interesting story from Egypt. The mummified body of a pharaoh has been seen for the first time in centuries after it's been digitally unwrapped with high-tech scanners. Beneath the layers, researchers discovered vital details never seen before, such as his appearance and the lavish, unique jewellery he was buried with.
Well, joining us now is Dr. Sahar Salim, Professor of Radiology, Faculty of Medicine at Cairo University. Good morning to you, Doctor. Thank you very, very much for your time. I love this story. I think it's absolutely fascinating. So what have you learned from digitally unwrapping this pharaoh?
First of all, this is a unique method, non-invasive method, to know a lot of information about the mummy without the need of physically interrupting or destroying the mummy. So this has set a method or a protocol for other mummies from all over the world to be treated in the same way.
It's interesting because it's actually not the first time this particular mummy has been unwrapped. It was unwrapped back in the 11th century.
Truth. The mummy was robbed by the tomb thieves of the ancient times, and the later dynasty priests, they paid attention to their previous kings, and they treated the mummy as we saw in the CT scan, rewrapped it and added more amulets to it. So, but since then, for more than 3,000 years, the mummy have been wrapped, and it was the only mummy, a royal mummy, that have never been physically unwrapped in modern times.
And Dr. Salim, what benefit do you actually get from digitally unwrapping by scanning this pharaoh rather than, physically peeling back the layers?
You preserve the mummy, which is a human being. Number one, he's a great king, so we want to preserve his body. And from the heritage point of view, it's a very precious piece. So we do not want to disturb that. But on the other hand, we want to know a lot of information about this mummy, how he looked like, and also about the maneuver and the treatment of the priests of the later dynasty and how they did to the kings. Especially
Sorry, we know he was 35 years old. He was approximately 169 centimetres tall. He was circumcised, and he had good teeth. That was a surprise because pharaohs tend not to have very good teeth.
Yeah, true. He has an overbite, which seems to run in the family because we compared his facial features with those of his father, King Ahmos I. We have his mummy at the Luxor Museum. So it's good to know the similarity between them. Both have overbite. There is no caries, no attrition, as we saw in the other mummies. So in this regard, his teeth was in a good condition.
And Dr. Salim, we're seeing pictures on the screen right now. It looks absolutely fascinating. And you, of course, took part in this project. How exciting was that, you know, to unwrap a part of Egyptian history in this way?
It was so exciting to me, like unwrapping a Christmas gift.
Oh.
So you would love to know what is behind this wrapping, and especially with the caliber of a king like Amenhotep the Great, who ruled Egypt for 21 years, and he was worshipped as God for his death.
I mean, he was 35, in good health as far as we know, but he was dead. So do we know how he died?
We don't know how he died because his body, the mummy, did not carry any mutilation or any stigma of a disease. So,
I think we've lost our link to
I
Cairo.
think it remains a mystery, Simon, is the answer to that one. That was Dr. Sahar Salim. She's Professor of Radiology at Cairo University. Fascinating.
Yeah, congratulations to her. Now, coming up, more on Boris Johnson's decision to let New Year's Eve celebrations in England go ahead. Was it the right decision? We'll be having a look at that and the way the papers have treated it. But now, let's have a look at the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
So was it a flat battery or Benjamin?
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning, it's your Great British Breakfast with Simon McCoy and me, Ellie Costello.
And it's a happy new year in England as there are no new COVID restrictions announced. So is Boris Johnson right or wrong to do nothing? England is now the only country in the United Kingdom where you can go to a nightclub for New Year's Eve.
But you might struggle to get out of the country. Travel experts are warning of severe disruption over the new year as airline passengers have been hit by the grounding of thousands of flights due to staff shortages caused by COVID.
And it's certainly not a happy morning for England. Cricket fans, Joe Root's side thumped 3-0 by Australia in the Ashes.
It's the Great British Breakfast with Simon and Ellie.
Well, let's start the day by taking a look at some of the front pages in the papers. We start with the Daily Mail. It leads with Boris's New Year cheer, it says. The Mail's sources said nothing in the figures suggested that hospitals were about to be overwhelmed. It also highlighted the huge boost hospitality would get from the Prime Minister's decision.
The eye's gone for no new COVID restrictions before 2022. It says Boris Johnson made the decision after receiving pre-Christmas data. It also says that the NHS is not facing an exponential rise in hospital admissions, although it is still under pressure. This is made worse by thousands of workers being off sick with coronavirus.
Headline on The Times is no COVID curbs on New Year's parties. It also highlights the plight of consumers, saying household energy bills are set to double. The average price of energy bills could reach more than £1,800, according to estimates sent by Ofgem to ministers.
The Express has gone for dire warning energy bills could double. It says soaring gas and electricity prices will cause an enormous crisis next year.
There's a bit of doom and gloom on the front of the Mirror. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is a no-show, it says, despite record COVID crisis and the NHS staff shortages. Uncertainty reigns, even if New Year's Eve celebrations are going ahead, it says.
And on the Telegraph as well, no new restrictions on New Year's Eve. Another story on the cover is, of course, energy. Bills could triple unless a £20 billion fund is set up to help. Ministers have been warned.
On the front of the Star, slight change of gear, Happy New Beer, celebrating no lockdown and balmy temperatures of 15 degrees forecast, with hopefully, it says, a cold beer. And the first picture of the Windsor Castle crossbow suspect features in the paper.
Well, this morning we have a panel to go through the stories inside the papers. Benjamin Butterworth from the iPaper and former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire join us, and they've been with us all morning. So, Scarlett, the other story that's all over the papers, we did speak about, of course, the fact that New Year's parties can go ahead. We spoke about that just before the break. But the other big story is this dire warning that energy bills could double, which could lead to a really difficult winter, January and February, for lots of families.
Yeah, I mean, this is really bad news, because at a time when food prices are going up, everything's going up, all of a sudden is the energy prices. And we've heard stories over the years of people choosing between heating their homes and eating. We've heard awful stories of pensioners sort of not getting out of bed actually because they're so cold they can't afford to do their heating. And this was all before this rise. Now, what people are saying is the government could remove VAT, which would really help. I mean, it would still mean that the prices go up, but actually it would help put some cap on them. Because what we have to remember is that for the poorest and most vulnerable, they've had £20 a week taken off their benefits. So it really, really is tough. And the energy companies are saying to the government, we've got to get together. And the problem is, this story is not new. We all have known it's been, I mean, I've been commenting on this on GB News for some months and nothing has been done. And finally, the business secretary is getting together with the energy companies to talk about what they can do. Meanwhile, people are having to deal with these incredible rising prices.
Let's talk about the position of Boris Johnson. He may have secured it a bit tighter this morning with the news of the no restrictions in England, but a lot of speculation in the papers as to who would replace him if that was to pass. It was thought just a couple of weeks ago, Benjamin, that Rishi Sunak was a shoo-in. Now Liz Truss has emerged as the front runner.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of sort of competing within the Tory party about who'll take over from Boris Johnson, which, you know, given that landslide he had in 2019, is almost extraordinary to think about. But there's a big poll by Opinion in today's papers, and it puts, first of all, it puts Labour on 39% and the Tories on 32%, which is one of Labour's best polling results for quite some time. But they've dug into the numbers. So you've got Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, and the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss. And actually, there was a poll from Conservative Home that said that Liz Truss had overtaken Rishi Sunak as the favourite minister in the government among Tory members. But, and here's where there's so often a gap between, you know, party members and the public, according to this poll, Truss would do 70 seats worse than what Boris Johnson would do if there was a snap election tomorrow, which is pretty dramatic. Rishi Sunak would perform better than Boris Johnson, and the two worst would be Michael Gove and Liz Truss. I think that would be a real eye-opener to some of the people at the top of the Tory hierarchy, because Liz Truss is clearly on manoeuvres to make herself the obvious leadership choice. But it looks like the public don't share that view.
Scarlett, what do you make of Liz Truss as PM?
Liz Truss has been on manoeuvres for a very, very long time. I mean, it was surprising that Boris Johnson made her Foreign Secretary, because she's had her Instagram account, she's had her personal photographer doing pictures to show that she's very much for the Tory right. I mean, this is amazing. This is a Remainer who's absolutely moved over to the Tory right. Originally, I mean, she was one of David Cameron's A-listers. She was absolutely the metropolitan woman, right? And she's now moved over to woo the Tory party faithful, and doing it very, very successfully. I mean, people like Conservative Home have been tipping her. Yeah, I mean, she doesn't. But on the other hand, she doesn't get on with the public. I mean, that's what's so odd, and it's very strange that Boris Johnson would give her that platform. Apart from the fact he must hate Rishi Sunak, because at least it means that he's up against two of them fighting. And one of the reasons that a lot of people think he will last longer is because there's no one obvious successor. And as long as Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss appear to be sort of rats fighting in a sack, Boris Johnson is quite safe.
Right, Benjamin, what else has caught your eye this morning?
Well, there's a number of stories. There's the one you mentioned earlier about Wales, and they've said that you shouldn't refer to Her Majesty's government, you should refer to the UK government, which I think will surprise a lot of people. And then also, of course, there's New Year's Eve coming up. You mentioned the restrictions, but I don't know if you can't afford your gas prices, it's going to be the warmest New Year's Eve ever. There's a prediction, a forecast, that it'll be 15 degrees on the south coast of England, which is crazy weather for New Year's Eve.
Frightening, actually. Well, it's slightly frightening that we keep on breaking records, isn't it? This is always, you know, the hottest summer since records began, the warmest winter. But actually, what's strange is that in London, I mean, Trafalgar Square is closed, right? Because normally it's freezing and people go out to Trafalgar Square. But the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has said there'll be no celebrations because of COVID. So quite what will happen, as the government says, do it outdoors.
I'll be in my shorts and T-shirt if it's 15 degrees outside.
Oh, the old mankini will be out. The thing about London, Scarlett, is that those fireworks that London does are spectacular. You know, world-beating. And every New Year's Eve, latterly, when you went around the world, there was with great pride that you saw what was happening in London. And Sadiq Khan has cancelled all this.
Yeah. I mean, he's cancelled it because of the virus, right? I mean, you know,
most people saw it on television.
Well, because lots of people would go down to the Thames. I mean, that's what... I mean, I used to watch it from somebody's balcony. Frankly, I think it was probably better on television. I think it's much, much better on television. They were spectacular. I mean, they also do, of course, cost a fortune. But I think what he was trying to do was to stop people from gathering.
From having fun.
Well, I think we can have fun in lots and lots of ways.
But I think there will still be some kind of celebration in London, but it'll be somewhere where people can't gather and see it in person, which is the logic. Look, I thought it was a bit over the top, to be honest, to cancel the fireworks. I think you could have done the fireworks and policed it in a way, told people not to turn up in huge numbers. You know, they always have a cordon around the area so that you don't get a terrible crush. You could have just reduced the number of people allowed in that space. I do think it was a shame the second year in a row to cancel those because, you know, I love on New Year's Eve, you see the fireworks from around the world. It's one of those, you know, special things as the world welcomes in a new year.
Yeah. Oh, well, we've ended on a low. Benjamin and Scarlett, thank you once again. And we're not done with you yet. We'll see you later on. Thank you very much.
We get our money's worth. Back to the main story, and Health Secretary Sajid Javid has confirmed that no new COVID restrictions will be brought in before the new year in England. Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who was widely expected to make an announcement yesterday, said that ministers will continue to assess the data and once again urge the public to get their first, second or booster jab without delay. Whilst the announcement, or lack of, will ensure many people's New Year's plans will go ahead, the government is still advising people to remain cautious, celebrating outside where possible.
Well, we speak to an oncologist shortly, but let's first talk to our political commentator, Dr. John Coulter. John, good morning to you.
Good morning, Simon. Good morning, Ellie.
John, lots of emails coming into the programme this morning saying Boris can't do right for doing wrong, but on the whole, most people saying, you know, good on you.
Well, it's a situation here that the Prime Minister has decided maybe he's had enough of the Partygate scandal, so he's decided to go with the flow and let you folks in England enjoy yourselves, whilst we here in Northern Ireland and folk in Scotland and Wales, we are in what you can only describe as a semi-lockdown. So it's going to be a happy new year in England, but not so happy elsewhere. Because what we're looking at in all seriousness here is how do we combat and get ahead of the Omicron virus? So in Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, it's a policy of restrictions plus vaccinations. But clearly in England, it's going to be vaccinations first to try and beat it. Because obviously the big question will be, how will this affect English hospitals in the new year? If people are out socialising, so on and so forth. Because the key challenge for the National Health Service throughout the United Kingdom is how does it get ahead of the COVID pandemic?
John, this is not about... John, it's not about hospitals, it's not about the figures. This is about politics.
Oh, yes, I'll quite agree with that. This is putting really good spin on it. Look at what Boris Johnson, you and I have chatted before about the sleaze tsunami, about his car crash speech whenever he was talking about Peppa Pig, Partygate. He's got to win back those voters. North Shropshire was a huge disaster for the Tories. So he's got to offer something to the people of England so as the voters will not desert him as they did in North Shropshire. So I suppose if you wanted to be a dose of cynic or a cynical person, you could say this is just to suck up to the English electorate.
John, how is this going down in Northern Ireland? I mean, nightclubs there only reopened on Halloween and they shut again on Boxing Day. A really tough time for those in hospitality and events. So for those in Northern Ireland looking over at the decisions being made in Westminster now, you know, who's got it right?
Well, it's not so much a case, Ellie, of who's got it right, but why is there one rule for England and another rule for Northern Ireland? Our clubs have actually been shut since Boxing Day. Now, the Northern Ireland Executive has acted and it's pumped £40 million for special grants for the hospitality sector. From that point of view, socialising is down to 3 households per home. And basically the work from home message has really been rammed home from that point of view, because there is a huge danger here in Northern Ireland. We have to say that our National Health Service could be overwhelmed if there is an Omicron virus really big wave in the new year. So the Northern Ireland Executive is trying to head this off at the pass.
And John, I was interested to ask you, we were hearing earlier that there's a bit of confusion in Wales about what the rules actually are. And you've got bar owners and restaurant owners there saying that customers are getting themselves quite confused. And when you look at Northern Ireland's rules right now, there is a mixture of legal requirements, such as nightclubs closing, which you just discussed there, but also strong recommendations, such as household mixing and working from home. Are you getting a sense that it's getting quite complicated over there, or is it all going along fine?
There is a lot of complications around who will enforce it. Will it be the police who will enforce it? Let's say, for example, on public transport, you have to wear your mask. Now, if there's someone on public transport who's not wearing a mask, and obviously we're setting aside those people who have special medical conditions, but if somebody deliberately decides not to wear a mask on public transport or to flaunt the rules, who comes down hard and heavy on them? Are there going to be fines? Are they going to be arrested? What's going to happen from that point of view? So I think it's not so much a confusion about the actual restrictions themselves and the interpretation, but who enforces them. And that's going to be a major problem, because obviously the harder and the tougher you start to enforce things, the more you resemble almost like a police state, or the way Germany was going recently. I think they operated a policy of no jab, no job.
Dr. John Coulter, fascinating to speak to you as always over there in Northern Ireland for us. Thank you very much for your time.
That's the political reaction. Let's have a look at another side of this. Professor Angus Dalgleish joins us now, oncologist. And I'm just wondering if that decision by Boris Johnson, did you agree that with a sense of cheer or fear?
Relief. It's absolute relief. It's exactly what I wanted. I think it is the absolute correct decision. It shows the big hole in the devolution of the United Kingdom, where we have different decisions being made by different people. But I welcome this for COVID. I think actually what's happening is that COVID is less dangerous than anything previous, and that the pressure on hospitals is going to be much less. And it could be even more so if people who had early symptoms of COVID were to take much more aggressive control of the situation. As I've said, that this is something which goes to the nose, the upper part of your breathing apparatus, as it were, and the virus sticks there. So you can basically get rid of it with a variety of mouthwashes, betadine, etc., soluble aspirin, pumping up vitamin D. And all these things will actually reduce the pressure more on hospitals than anything else now, because this is a disease. The reason it's so much more infectious is it passes to the nose, but it is 10 times less likely to go down to the chest. And it is that what causes the need to go to hospital if you get very short of breath, etc. So I'm extremely optimistic about this and feel that we should be taking advantage of it and getting anybody who has symptoms to take these precautions. So that will greatly reduce the pressure on people going to the hospital. So I think it's a very, very wise decision indeed. And I do think that this Omicron, as I mentioned before, it's so infectious, it's virtually impossible to avoid it. So you want to reduce your chances of getting ill with it. And, hopefully we are now at the start of the end game of this virus. So I think we need to be very positive. I find too much doom and gloom around, rather like that people are wallowing in it. I mean, we really do need to see the bright side of this. We still have to be cautious, but that is a responsibility I'm so glad the government have finally given to us. Because everybody I know is cautious proportionately. Those who do have a lot of underlying health conditions are being very, very cautious. And those who've had it before, who are fully jabbed, they are trying to get on with their lives as normal. And I think this is the right thing to do.
That word wallowing, I think some people will be uncomfortable with that, given that we are still talking about a disease which does kill people. All right, you're making the point that they tend to be on the vulnerable side of things. But I've not heard someone say this is the start of the end game. You actually think we're at that point, are we?
That's my impression. And looking at all the facts and figures, I spent 2 or 3 hours yesterday looking at all the facts and figures from around the world. And I do think that we're at a stage where we can be more positive about this and stop people having to go into hospital. I mean, we do there's a host of pills which can be taken to reduce the infectiousness of the virus. People who start to get ill, there's a variety of antibodies that have been approved, and there's a real push that these should be given to people on a certain cusp to prevent them going into hospital. Some of the improvements can be quite remarkable. So yes, I am trying to be to have a more positive take on the future of this pandemic.
Well, it's good to hear that, and we welcome you to the programme, and I've enjoyed the chat. Professor Angus Dalgleish, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Coming up, housing prices in the prime bracket are soaring at a decade-high rate. We'll be joined by a property consultant, but first, let's get some weather for you.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
If you're an England cricket team supporter, I've got some rather depressing news for you. We have been completely humiliated by Australia. Joe Root's side surrendered the Ashes on the morning of the third day of the third test in Melbourne as Australia crushed England by an innings and 14 runs to take an unbeatable 3-0 series lead. The result means Australia have retained the Ashes after just 12 days of actual cricket. They will be hoping to seal a 5-0 whitewash. The fourth test will begin in Sydney on January the 4th. The England team could fly home before then. The result's probably going to be the same.
Now,
sorry, but it has been rather depressing.
You're a bit depressed over there, aren't you?
The thing about England, whether it's football, cricket, whatever it is, you start with high hopes.
I know.
Even when you lose one, you think, yeah, we're going to show them next time. And even last night, people were going, oh, we'll still do this.
You had hope yesterday morning. And
I had hope.
And here we are. We should have learnt our lesson by now.
It's the joy of being an England supporter of anything.
It's a journey.
Anyway,
it's an emotional journey.
We'll move on.
Yeah. Now, travel experts are warning of severe disruption over the new year as airline passengers have been hit by the grounding of thousands of flights due to staff shortages caused by COVID. Around 8,000 flights were cancelled globally between Christmas Eve and Boxing Day. Our London reporter Alice Porter joins us now. There she is for us. Hello, Alice. You're actually isolating still down to COVID, so I hope you're feeling better. How bad is the flight disruption currently for us here in the UK?
Good morning, Ellie. Well, I've had a look at the latest figures and almost 2,000 flights have already cancelled this morning, and it's not even 8:30. So I think that gives an indication of the scale of the problem. I mean, of course, normally when flights are grounded at this time of year, it's usually down to bad weather. But what we're seeing is it's really because of coronavirus and particularly because of Omicron that's really causing a lot of problems, particularly in the US and particularly in China. And there's a lot of disruption with flights there, but that ends up having a knock-on effect of flights around the world. And of course, Christmas, New Year, this sort of festive period, it's a peak time for people to be travelling, visiting loved ones, particularly people who haven't been able to see family members for quite a long time. And of course, the sector has had really struggled over the last sort of year and a half, 2 years. So quite simply, they really need those flights to take off.
The worry, Alice, of course, is that things will get worse before they get better because, well, planes are all in the wrong places. I don't even start with trains and just getting around the country. But there is a sense that everything's in fairly chaotic state.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, if we look at the UK first, I mean, the sector was starting to improve and get back on its feet towards the end of this year, and then Omicron hit. And so then the government put in a number of additional measures for testing when people arrive and then having to isolate. And that has a knock-on effect in terms of passengers, because simply people don't want to travel as much. It's a lot less attractive to go away, and that has a massive impact on airlines. So the demand is not there in the way we would see normally at this time of year. And the concern is that if those restrictions stay in place, then it could cause an enormous downturn in the sector after an incredibly difficult 2 years. But let's just say, you know, you're still happy to kind of go ahead and book your flight. Well, where do you go at this time of year? France and Germany, they've made it quite clear that they're not really accepting travellers from the UK. Austria has followed suit, and you have to have been boosted in order to go there. So that takes off a huge amount of the market at this time of year for people who want to go skiing. And then if you wanted to do perhaps a last minute sort of getaway somewhere, seeing all the chaos and the travel disruption at the moment would put off quite a lot of people wanting to do a last minute getaway. And the worry is what we're seeing with France, what we're seeing with Germany and Austria is whether there could be other countries following suit. And that's the worry. And that's what travel expert Paul Charles was saying to me.
I think there's a danger that other governments around the world put in place tougher measures because they're at an earlier stage in the cycle of Omicron than the UK is. The UK seems at the moment to be getting through this by putting in place perhaps cautious guidance and advice rather than tougher restrictions in the UK itself. And that means that the spike is happening faster than might be in other countries. So the concern is that other countries put in place measures to stop UK citizens travelling. And that would be my concern, that January itself sees a wide range of restrictions in place, which put off people from travelling further. There's no doubt 2022 is going to be a strong year in terms of bookings and confidence once we get through this wave of Omicron. The problem is it's getting through the next month or so, and no cash coming in for much of the travel sector. That's going to hurt those smaller businesses that will find it difficult to survive.
Well, Alice, we got a sense of it from Paul Charles there, but it has been a really difficult 2 years for all of those in the travel industry. What support do they need now to get through these really difficult few weeks ahead?
Well, I think one of the biggest issues that's facing travellers, but also the travel sector at the moment, is also having all these tests that you have to do, even if you're doubly vaxxed. So, for example, if you take myself, I'm hopefully flying to Cyprus in the new year. Now, I've been doubly jabbed, I've been boosted, I'm currently isolating with coronavirus. So, you know, I'm a pretty sort of sure bet that I probably wouldn't have coronavirus. But with the current regulations that are in place, you have to do a COVID test to come back into the country. You also have to have a PCR test within the 2 days, and you have to isolate before you get that result. And that's really off-putting to a lot of travellers, and a lot of people within the sector are saying that it's too expensive, it's not the right approach, that we need to be looking a bit more like we were with Delta and, for example, just having a lateral flow test. And then what we're doing at the moment, there's too much bureaucracy, it's too expensive, and it's really off-putting for travellers. So there'll be a lot of people who are hoping when the government does their next review on travel on the 5th of January that we might see a relaxation of these rules. Sadly, I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. And there are also cries to perhaps bring back the furlough scheme, but also to make sure that there is some additional financial support that is there in the same way that we've seen for hospitality.
Alice Porter, thank you so much for that update there, and I really do hope you get to go away to Cyprus in the new year.
Now, this morning we have a fantastic panel to go through the stories inside the papers. They've been with us all morning. Benjamin Butterworth from the iPaper and the former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire with us. And I mean, there is really only one story as far as England is concerned this morning. It is the fact that Boris has given the all clear to celebrate New Year. But the angle to this very much is that it puts England out of step with the rest of the United Kingdom. Benjamin, we're getting texts saying this is the right thing, and even from people in Scotland saying we wish Nicola Sturgeon had done the same. But this pitting England against the rest of the UK is a risky thing to do, isn't it?
It is a risk for Boris Johnson as well, because if it goes wrong, well, then those devolved leaders can say, well, actually, the evidence was there. You could have made the same decision that we made. And so, that's a political gamble for Boris Johnson. But also, I think it will take a few weeks until the consequences of this, the consequence of Christmas and New Year's Eve mingling, will come to the forefront. Now, the only thing to caveat that with is that some of the things that people in Scotland and Wales, Northern Ireland are facing, that while I'm sure they're very unwelcome, I question the public health grounds for some of those. So the 2-metre distancing in restaurants and pubs, for example, it strikes me as slightly tinkering around the edges. Is that going to have a serious impact on something like Omicron, which is so incredibly transmissible that over 100,000 people a day have been getting it in some of the recent figures? That's pretty huge numbers. And so, I think it's unclear whether there will be a serious impact on what happens in those nations. I think in England, a lot of people are going to be happy to have their New Year's Eve. And even though a lot of people were imposing restrictions on themselves in the run-up to Christmas, I suspect you'll start to see that easing because people just wanted to have a normal Christmas. Once it gets into January, I'm not sure people will have self-restrictions that much.
Scarlett, has Boris done the right thing here?
We have to wait and see. I mean, look, I really, really don't want another lockdown, and I hate restrictions. I like going out a lot. I like seeing my friends.
That's a yes, then.
No, what I'm saying is we have to. The problem up until now is that what Boris Johnson has always done is he's done it too late, and then we've been in lockdown much longer because we're not just out of step with the rest of the UK. We're also out of step with Europe. And that means, Germany doesn't want us, France doesn't want us, and wait until the rest of them say, you can't come here. So what we have to do is it is waiting and seeing. It is seeing, we all know that there's an incredible lag between cases and serious illness and death. And that's what we're all waiting for. And we have to hope. Those of us in England really have to hope that they've got the science, that the politicians are right on the science.
Us being out of step with Europe is not anything particularly new. We've just spoken to one professor who just said he sees this as the start of the beginning of the end. This is Angus Dalgleish. Massive response from people watching that, saying at last someone talking some sense about all this. And he said that he felt the media, that others in the medical profession have been overstating this for too long, and that we've got to the point now where we've just got to live with this and get on with our lives. And Benjamin, that really has touched a nerve with people.
There was a poll just before Christmas of how many people would support a lockdown, and I think it was 56% said they would support a lockdown. Now, I'm cynical about that figure. First of all, it's a lot less than support for previous lockdowns, so it's a notable shift in the public at large. But actually, I think a lot of people, when they're actually asked, do you want to be forced to stay at home? Do you want to not be able to go to the pub on New Year's Eve? Well, they tend to give a different answer to the question of, do you want to lock down other people? People are often happy to see other people stay at home, and they're not so keen on it when the rules apply to themselves. So I think there's going to be a big shift. But look, we're clearly out of step with the rest of Europe. I think the truth is there's a political element to this, in that there has been a shift in the Tory party as to whether they'll accept this. Lockdown shouldn't be a public health lever that you can just pull at a whim. And so when you don't have the evidence to support it at the moment of the fear of beds being overrun in ICUs, then I think that's why Boris Johnson has stepped back. They said that if there was 400 admissions a day in London, which is the epicenter of Omicron right now, then they'd introduce restrictions. Well, the figure on Christmas Day was 278. So that's a lot less than what they feared. If they stayed around that level, I don't think we'll have any serious restrictions at all.
I think the problem is that a year ago, well, just over a year ago, we all remember that in the lead up to Christmas, Boris Johnson said cancelling Christmas would be inhuman. It's absolutely terrible. We're not going to do anything. And 5 days before Christmas, everything fell apart. And that's, had he done a circuit breaker, it might have worked earlier. And that's the whole worry, is how much of this is based on public health, how much is political. Because what everybody wants is, yes, this is a virus we're going to have to learn to live with. This is a virus that is not going to go away. And the question is, really, is, are we going to be talking fourth boosters, as they're doing in Israel? and having to have boosters every 6 months. Can we actually deal with that? Or how are we going to do it?
And there were support packages that were announced for Wales, Scotland and for Northern Ireland for hospitality businesses that are obviously going to be suffering at their busiest time of year. I mean, even here in England, we saw in the weeks before Christmas, at least, people not turning up to their restaurant reservations. They were worried. They were kind of doing a self-imposed lockdown because of the spread of Omicron. Benjamin, this is going to be really difficult for people, isn't it? Even if this isn't mandated.
Yeah, and this is kind of where the problem is, right? Because it's one thing to say, oh, we don't want a lockdown. We don't want the government to implement that. But when people are nervous of the consequences, the practical consequences of getting COVID, so the 7 to 10 days self-isolation period, the money they might lose, when people stop turning up to restaurants and pubs and nightclubs and theatres and all those kind of places where you go and mix with large groups of people, well, then actually for the businesses on the receiving end, it may as well be a legal lockdown in the first place. The only difference is they don't get the money. So, you know, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak, he said that, I need to put my teeth in this morning, right? He's got this £1 billion package, which is about £6,000 per company. Well, you know, that for a restaurant in the run-up to Christmas is absolutely nothing. And when they've paid for perishable goods like food, like drink, you know, this is a serious problem for them. And I think you might see some businesses being in a much worse financial state this year than they were under a full lockdown last year.
Well, fantastic to have your thoughts there on the stories on the front pages of the papers. That's Benjamin Butterworth from the iPaper and former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire.
I think you're back. You're back a bit later, aren't you?
Yes, at 9 o'clock, I believe, yes.
Whether you like it or not. But anyway, we'll see you later on. Anyway, coming up, we spoke about it earlier, a fascinating story. An Egyptian mummy has been digitally unwrapped, revealing how a pharaoh lived his life. We know what he looks like, but do we know... I'm not even reading this out about what... Do we know what he sphinx about? Oh, dear, oh, dear. Plus, more reaction to Boris Johnson's decision not to impose more restrictions in England before the new year. We'll see you in a moment. We're just going to have a word with the producer.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning, you're watching The Great British Breakfast with Simon McCoy and me, Ellie Costello. Here are some of today's big stories. There will be no further COVID restrictions in England before the new year. Health Secretary Sajid Javid said people should remain cautious and celebrate outside on New Year's Eve if possible. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said ministers would continue to monitor the data and urged people to get their first, second or booster jab without delay. Meanwhile, both England and Scotland reported record cases over Christmas.
France has announced tighter COVID restrictions amid concerns there over the Omicron variant. From January the 3rd, remote working will become compulsory for those who can, and public gatherings will be limited to 2,000 people for indoor events. The news comes as France recorded more than 100,000 new infections on Saturday. That's the highest number reported in the country since the pandemic began. But the Prime Minister stopped short of implementing a New Year's Eve curfew.
New rules for hospitality in Wales have left some customers confused, whilst others have stayed away. That's according to some bar owners. Since Boxing Day, 2-metre social distancing returned in Wales, along with mask wearing, table service and contact tracing. Groups have also been limited to a maximum of 6 people. That's all to slow down the spread of the Omicron variant. One bar owner said it's been a nightmare trying to enforce the new rules, as many people just aren't aware.
Ministers are undergoing pressure to protect households from soaring energy costs as they face the threat of their household bills doubling in a year. Estimates sent by Ofgem, the energy regulator, to ministers this month said that the price cap was set to rise by 40% in April unless action was taken, with average bills reaching more than £1,800.
The number of people taking advantage of the post-Christmas sales on Monday fell by 32% compared with 2019. That's according to new data, and it's amid persistent COVID concerns. Retail analyst Springboard said footfall figures were better than Boxing Day, but popular shopping destinations such as central London saw a drop caused in part by disruption to rail services. Shoppers chose to visit retail parks on Monday, but footfall there was still down 7.2% from pre-pandemic levels. That contrasted with a sharp drop in footfall on high streets, down 40.1% on 2019, and in shopping centres, which recorded a 38.8% decline.
The Taliban have said Afghan women seeking to travel long distances by road should be offered transport only if accompanied by a male relative. The directive, issued on Sunday, is the latest curb on women's rights since the Islamist group seized power in August. A majority of secondary schools remain shut for girls, while most women have been banned from working. Campaign group Human Rights Watch said the new restriction moved further towards making women prisoners.
More than 1,100 asylum seekers have falsely claimed to be children over the past year. That's according to official figures. 2 out of 3 of all cases where age was disputed and resolved were found to be 18 years or older. It is the highest number since the Home Office began recording the figures in 2006.
England surrendered the Ashes on the morning of the 3rd day of the 3rd Test in Melbourne as Australia crushed Joe Root's side by an innings and 14 runs. That means they've had an unbeatable 3-0 series lead. The result leaves Australia retaining the Ashes after just 12 actual days of cricket. They'll be hoping to seal a 5-0 whitewash. The 4th Test will begin in Sydney on January the 4th.
And today's weather, outbreaks of heavy rain will progress eastwards across central regions of the UK. Elsewhere, it will be drier with bright spells and just the odd isolated shower. A windy day to the south. Back to the big story of the day, and after an internal government meeting yesterday, Prime Minister Boris Johnson did not announce further restrictions to control the Omicron variant in England. This was after he was briefed on the impact that Christmas had had on COVID infections and hospital pressures. But what do people in the country think about the Prime Minister's approach? Well, our reporter Anna Riley spoke to people in Yorkshire to get their views. Anna, good morning to you. What are people saying to you?
Good morning, Ellie and Simon. Yes, there's a real mixed reaction here after the government resisted calls to go as far as Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland to curb social mixing. Instead, yesterday, Health Secretary Sajid Javid said people should remain cautious, and he urged those marking the start of 2022 to consider testing themselves before meeting with people and even meeting outdoors. And the government are still pushing for people to go out and get their jabs if they can. Restrictions could later change in the new year if the data shows that hospitalisations are increasing, though. And this most recent decision from the government comes as Boris Johnson faced warnings from within his cabinet and from resistive backbenchers to not overreact, as well as the hospitality industry urging Boris Johnson to hold firm amid signs that Omicron is not as dangerous as previous variants. I went on the streets of Hull to find out what people had to say about the government's recent reaction, and this is what they had to say.
Let people enjoy it this year and then bring it in. But it's going to affect a lot of businesses, obviously. A lot of people have already gone out of business where we used to go. So now we're having to shop elsewhere. So unfortunately that's going to affect people anyway, as we've seen over the last year. So yeah, I think it would be a good idea to bring it in because it's getting a little bit out of hand now again.
Just get on with it and carry on how we are. Yeah, carry on how we are and just live with it. Like, it's not fair, is it? Like, we're going to be stuck with it for a long time and we haven't got a cure for it, so yeah.
I just think he needs to decide what he's going to do and stop leaving us in the lurch right now. No one knows what we're doing, do we? And that's it.
I think the COVID situation and all what's been done for us has been absolutely fabulous with our injections, our booster, but I still do believe that we still should be very, very careful. You know, I still think that people should still take care because we don't really know when this is going to finish, or, you know, we've got to still look after each other and everybody else around us and just make sure that, fingers crossed, that it will get better. But for now, I'm still keeping my mask on because it's hiding me wrinkles as well.
I think it's disgusting. I think you should get another lockdown now. Definitely. Because it's not now get changing.
They're not too bad. I think he's doing all right at the minute. Can't do much more, can he?
So a whole range of opinions there. Some people thinking that we need another lockdown, others thinking we need to just get back to normal life now, and some people just calling for clarity and needing to know where they're going to be in the new year in terms of restrictions. No doubt, though, it's something that the hospitality industry will be happy about in the run-up to New Year, as well as people with plans for celebrating 2022 coming in January.
Anna, thank you very much. That's Anna Riley there in Hull for us this morning. Let's see.
Well, earlier on in the programme, we heard about how the mummified body of an Egyptian pharaoh, while his face has just been seen for the first time in centuries after being digitally unwrapped with high-tech scanners. Fascinating. Beneath the layers, researchers discovered vital details never before seen, such as his appearance and the lavish, unique jewellery that he was buried with.
Joining us now, Salim Ikram, a distinguished university professor from the American University in Cairo. Thank you for your time this morning. And the remarkable part of this is they've digitally unwrapped it, so they haven't disturbed anything. So we've got a really clear picture of this pharaoh, 35 years old, I think, when he was mummified.
At least, possibly more.
And how excited were you by what you found?
Well, I mean, this is the work of Dr. Sahar Salim and Zahi Hawass, but it was fantastic because this has been found over 100 years ago, this mummy, and no one knew what it was like inside. They've been doing a few x-rays, that's it. So now, digitally, we have been able to unwrap each piece, and you can see what his face was like. He had protuberant teeth, he had lots of amulets, and in fact, the robbers had damaged him, but he has been beautifully rewrapped by the priests about 200 years after he had been violated. So it's really fantastic because we are having this digital recreation of the whole body of the king, as well as all of the different wrappings going on. So it's really quite extraordinary.
And tell us about this pharaoh, because he does have a very interesting story, doesn't he? He was actually, you just alluded to it there, he was actually reburied twice, wasn't he?
Yes, from what we know. And in fact, by looking at his body, we're finding more and more out about his history. So he was one of the first pharaohs of the New Kingdom, a really major figure. And he was buried once, then he was moved, and then again the tomb was violated. And then he was rewrapped quite lovingly and very professionally, as you can see from this mummy, by the priests of the 21st dynasty, and then buried with a whole slew of other royal mummies in quite a different place, which was very secret and not found until about nearly 2,000 years later. So really, it's quite a phenomenal tale.
What do we know about him? What was so special about this particular young man?
Well, he is one of the founders, or close to one of the founders, of the New Kingdom, the 18th dynasty. And in fact, this is a time of greatness for Egypt. They built up their empire, and a lot of what we see from Egyptian art and architecture dates from this period. So he is someone who consolidated the country after it had been divided. He extended its borders. He started building large monuments. Parts of Karnak Temple are attributed to him. So he really was one of the great founders of the New Kingdom.
And how new is this technology? Oh, sorry for interrupting you there. How new is this technology and how exciting is it for you at what it can do? What's next? Will it be more mummies?
We've been using CT scan to understand mummies for some time, but as the sort of technology progresses, it becomes better and better and better. And in fact, now you can see far more details than you could ever before. And so it's really quite fantastic because the older machines give you only so much, but now with finer slicing, better technology, better imaging technology, you can really get into the nitty-gritty details. So things like seeing where the cut is, how deep the cut is, how long it is, positioning of the arms, and also even sometimes you can see all the resin layers between the linen wrapping. So you have all of that that really gives you better and a better understanding. And probably, you can use it with mummies, of course, whether they're humans or animals, but we can also start using this technology with other objects to look at for paintings, paint layers, repainting, details, and so forth. So really, as CT scan imaging improves, we can use it for archaeological purposes on a huge host of objects and artifacts. And it's really fantastic because we do not damage anything now. So really, there's no scraping away, there's no unwrapping. And then also the public can see each layer as it happens, as it's unwrapped. So you can sort of play with it and it gives you a better understanding yourself. And it gives a lot of researchers something to play with.
Yeah, it is fascinating. Professor Salima Ikram, thank you for your time and discussing it further. Thank you.
You're watching The Great British Breakfast with Simon McCoy and me, Ellie Costello. Coming up in the next hour, more stories from today's papers and your chance to watch the best of The Real Me with Gloria Di Piero. But first, let's take a look at the weather forecast.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world.